You didn't turn this thing on?
It's on, but it's just dangling. I would just let it dangle. Yeah, just press live. We're fine with where it's at.
My face
I
in
want to
there?
send it to some of my political groups. I'd probably be. I'm gonna put it on Southern
Is my
Politics.
face in there?
No, it's backwards.
Oh, I gotta
Come on
go
this
this
side.
way.
Yeah.
Hey Facebook, we're almost ready. They're getting some of the other phones and everything set up. And please, if you can share. Let's see, I was told my lawyer reporting civil rights violation. Either DA, we've shown to do absolutely nothing. How true is this, Jose? It's very true because we're dealing with a criminal cabal at the moment. But that should not deter you from filing these things and getting that on the record. How many states are y'all putting on notice before getting to the Supreme Court? As many as possible. 47 attorney generals in the Supreme Court have already been served, Lauren, and then I can't remember off the top of my head. We'll have to go back and look at how many city council and county commissioners we've served. Thank you, Craig. Hey,
It's
Tony.
just an unstable connection.
Yes, there is a script on the website.
It's on
if you
now.
guys want to
Okay.
go.
We might get a little bit of that.
Yeah, for the next 2 weeks, 2 or 3 weeks, guys, we need a really big push here with the city council and county commissioners. Johnny here in North Carolina shared your lives. Thanks. We actually served Greensboro. I just haven't had a chance to finish that video.
Greensboro.
Huh?
Greensboro, not Greenville.
I said Greensboro.
Oh,
Brings-
Sure you did.
She said it the right way.
sure you did.
She said it the right way.
That's
Hey,
my
Justin,
southern dialect.
And
What that is.
you're not from the South.
Whatever.
well,
You are from
he's a
the
chameleon.
Pacific
He's a chameleon.
Northwest. Like
He's a webfoot.
you say Warsh.
Wow.
I said crick.
We say Oregon and Nevada. Period.
Hey Justin, thanks for being here. Guys, Justin Carey, he is the guy that's collecting the affidavits for us.
What's up, Justin?
Hey Andrew, Brabson and Jen. Alright.
Oh yeah, Jen. Hi,
Yeah.
Jen.
That's cool.
Okay,
Jen was in DC with us.
here's your phone.
That's my phone? Oh, thank you.
Here's yours.
Come get close off.
Okay, so we have a whole bunch of cameras in front of us here. And
I'll do it so you don't slow down.
okay, and so we're just gonna have just an open discussion here.
Yeah.
But let me let them introduce themselves. We got Amy and John here.
So I'm John Conrad here, and I'm from California originally, but I live here in beautiful Plantsville, Connecticut. That's my wife Amy.
Hi, Amy Conrad here. Some of you might know me from the Family Court Fraud Warrior Project. I'm one of the moderators on that page. And we have Tanawah and Jessica with us this weekend, so we're taking advantage of the time.
Yes, we are.
So here's the thing, right? So John hasn't really had too many conversations with me yet. John's not completely clear on some of the things that I'm doing. So we thought it would be a good opportunity to wait on this conversation to allow him to find out what I'm doing.
Yes.
Right? And that way he can know.
It was hard because, I'm sitting here talking and we go into it and then everybody comes running out. Jess comes, shut up, stop. We're going to wait till we're on camera. And then, so here we are. So I have not filled out one of these affidavits. What the heck is this?
1 second. That's right.
Yeah.
Right there. So a couple things as we start here. I want to remind everybody that we have scam accounts out there. So there are accounts that are pretending to be Jen or Jess.
My name's Jess.
Jess, there's okay. So there are fake accounts out there that's pretending to be Jess. If someone contacts you pretending to be her and asks you for money, it's not Jess. All right. So please don't get scammed and don't blame us if you get scammed because we're not texting you, messaging you, asking for money. If you guys want to donate, you're welcome to do so, but no one has to donate. Same thing with me. There's still fake accounts that are out there that are pretending to be me. I will never contact you asking for money. So please, if anybody does that, it's not coming from us. All right. So there's that, and then again, I want to remind everybody here at the beginning that if you want to get the script to be read to the county commissioner or city councils, or you want to get the notice to be given to the clerk, or you want to get either one of the affidavits, either the absence of the indictment by a grand jury affidavit or the interference with the familial unit, you can get all of that from justicewithoutlimits.org, okay? Justicewithoutlimits.org, and you can download that paperwork and get it from there, and that will help. So, yeah, so let's, and then I know that Jess has a pinned comment here. If anybody wants to contact us and ask a question, Jess is going to be fielding these questions here. You can call 252-940-8545. Again, 252-940-8545, and she will be fielding these questions from you guys and bringing them out here to ask. So
Somebody will put it in the chat, I'm sure, right, or something like that.
she's got it in the
She's got it
Facebook
pinned.
chat, but not over here. So
Not on ours, so
Not on TikTok.
you have to go on theirs to.
So one more time, 252-940-8545, and we will continue to repeat that throughout this this little soiree.
I feel like I'm
All right.
playing basketball. Calling in a foul.
So what was the question again, John?
So I mean, obviously, I know, I've seen your stuff. I've listened to it while I'm driving, and you know, my biggest problem is in, you know, obviously we got to talking a little bit. My biggest problem is in the family court, and I'm going, that's not my problem. Over there in that criminal side, I'm not a criminal, and why would I care about this? And he's answered it a little bit, but I want you to redo it because that was so awesome.
So a lot of you had this question, you guys. What does an indictment by a grand jury have to do with the family court, right? How is what I'm doing going to help issues within family court? And so there's a couple things we have to look at fundamentally. First off is the Constitution itself. So you see, there's a couple of different types of constitutional rights. One is what is called an enumerated constitutional right. That's a right that's actually written in the Constitution, the Bill of Rights.
So when I said care, custody, and control.
Care, custody, and control it's not written in the Constitution, you guys. It's not there. That's what's known as an incorporated right. You see, the Supreme Court can create rights. The Supreme Court of the United States can create a right, that they claim is protected by the Constitution. But that is what's called an incorporated right.
That sounds pretty good, though. I mean,
Yeah.
like care, custody, control of my children. I have the right, independent of, you know, the.
Absolutely. So you know, one of the things is we talk about natural rights. Let me ask you, how many deer have their fawn taken from them naturally, right? How many bear lose their cubs naturally? You see, the right to have a child, that is a fundamental right that's natural by God. In nature, how many of them had their children taken away and given to another adoptive deer, elk, whatever? So the natural right exists, and that's why the Supreme Court made the decision in 1984 in the case Roberts versus United States. You see, in 1984, the Supreme Court of the United States came out, and they identified two new incorporated rights, meaning that they found the rights to exist protected under the First and the 14th Amendment. So what they said is that you have the right to have an intimate, familial relationship with your child without governmental interference. And you have the right for your child to have a relationship with you without governmental interference. That is called the right of intimate association. It was found to exist by the Supreme Court. Therefore, what happened there was in 1984, the Supreme Court incorporated a right into the Constitution. They said, yeah, it's not here, it's not written, but we're going to say that the Constitution protects that particular issue. That's incorporated. The difference is enumerated versus incorporated. Because there was a case in 2019 called Timbs versus Indiana. That's TIMBS versus Indiana. And in that particular case, it was a unanimous decision by the Supreme Court of the United States, 6 of the same justices that we're dealing with today. And what they said there was that they said that the privileges and immunities of United States citizens are at a minimum those that are enumerated within the Bill of Rights, given their legal effect against interference by the states because of their codification in the Constitution's text. So what they were saying was, if it's written in the text of the Constitution, that is at a minimum what every single United States citizen is guaranteed, regardless of where they choose to reside within the jurisdiction of the United States. Now, the reason why we're sticking with that here, okay, all right, so we've got a caller from jail. He's going to be very limited time. We're going we're going to be sympathetic of that,
Absolutely.
and let's go ahead and see what he has to say, guys.
It's-
Remind me to come back to it and right here.
All right, Tina, you're live now.
Hi, Tina.
Hey, I just wanted to say that I fully support you guys in everything that you're doing as a social activist myself. I applaud you for your hard work and your dedication to helping expose this injustice.
Tina,
Thank you.
can you tell them where you're at?
I'm calling from Morgan County Jail in Decatur, Alabama. I'm currently being incarcerated for criminal contempt of court based on false allegations that I posted 186 social media posts about the dad that I never posted.
So it's
But I
family
was
court
denied
side.
a hearing, I was denied a trial, I was arrested and sentenced without having an opportunity to be a trial by jury or have an attorney. I mean, the injustice is completely insane of what I've been dealing with here in Morgan County, Alabama. But yeah, I've been wrongfully imprisoned, and I'm now fighting it in the appeals process.
So if I could, let me explain to everybody what's going on.
Can you repeat what she said so TikTok?
Okay, so she's currently incarcerated in Morgantown, Alabama, or sorry, Morgan County,
Morgan County.
Morgan County, Alabama, on
This is a result of family court corruption.
so is on criminal contempt charges for posting information on social media sites that was adverse to the
That's a prior
opposing party.
restraint. That's a prior restraint, right?
Yeah.
So the United States Supreme Court came out in 2010 in a Supreme Court decision, United States Supreme Court decision. It was written by Justice Kennedy, and I'd have to look up the name of the case, but in 2010, Supreme Court of the United States came out in another unanimous decision, and what they said is that they said that government must be content neutral with regard to matters of speech, meaning that they can neither favor nor disfavor one party or another. Therefore, government cannot hinder or obstruct free speech in order to control the narrative. That would be a First Amendment violation of the most basic sort.
That's right.
Right. So government's not supposed to be in the business of deciding, what words are supposed to be expressed or anything else. I mean, this would be a First Amendment violation of the most basic sort. So when government steps in and they decide, well, we're going to permit government to make their claims, put your faces out in the news and talk about the things that you allegedly did. We're going to plaster that all over the place, but we're going to hinder or obstruct free speech of the opposing party to prevent the counter argument or counter narrative from being expressed. That's a First Amendment violation of the most basic sort, written by Justice Kennedy, and we just lost Tina.
No, I think you're getting another call. I think you still have Tina.
Okay,
Still here,
okay,
still here.
okay.
So there's another side of that though too. There's the subject and then there's content.
You can cut out a little bit, say that again, sir.
So content is still speech, right?
The majority of my content, I made about maybe 20 posts that reference the father, but the majority of my content is directly reflecting family court corruption and how it's a denial of constitutionally protected 14th Amendment rights to deny parents access to their children. And if a parent's not proven unfit, then they should be allowed to have time with their children. It should be something that the Constitution addresses. Because there's so much family court corruption now that men and women are being incarcerated for things like unpaid child support or contempt of court, things that are not even proven. False allegations can go very far in the civil courtroom, and our constitutional rights are just completely ignored. And that's what's led to where I'm at right now. I wasn't even given a trial. I was just sentenced.
Yeah. So there's a couple things. First off, I want to explain what happens when government becomes the accuser, because that's what's happened to Tina, right? Government says that she's in contempt of court. Well, who's the court? The court's the state. So she has offended the court by disobeying a court order. That's essentially what criminal contempt is. She's disobeyed a court order, therefore the offended party is the court.
So they move verbiage around, basically.
Right. And so what happens when the state becomes your accuser is it's known as a trial by affidavit, right? So with information, which you guys know, this is what I'm fighting. The absence of the indictment by a grand jury means that you're being charged by way of information, meaning that government has received information of you committing a crime by someone. A law enforcement officer has given information to the court saying that you have committed a crime. And what happens there, according to Blackstone, is that when you are charged by an affidavit, your right to confront your accuser, it evaporates because you can't put that information on the stand and cross-examine it. So you are then presumed guilty based upon the mere fact of being accused of committing a crime. This is what's called an irrebuttable presumption of guilt. Irrebuttable presumption of guilt is, again, you are presumed guilty based upon the mere fact of being accused of committing a crime. Therefore, the police come out and they arrest you, right? And they bring you into jail and they start depriving you of rights that the Constitution protects. You don't have the right to be able to use your property or go out and earn a living or take care of your family or any of these things that you are constitutionally protected under normal circumstances. These are being deprived of you based upon someone accusing you of committing a crime.
Right.
You haven't been found guilty of anything. So in an irrebuttable presumption of guilt, and you're charged by this affidavit, the trial by affidavit, what happens is that you have never had the opportunity to rebut that affidavit or the allegations within that affidavit. Now you're being arrested, you're being taken to jail, you're being presumed guilty, and all of your rights are being taken from you without due process. So,
Without due process, that's my 14th Amendment constitutionally protected right. Due process of law, that is right. 793 days is my sentence.
oh, so that is actually an infamous crime. So, yeah. So let's come back to that in just one moment here, Tina, because I want to explain what an infamous crime is. But just one moment, let me finish this. So any affidavit, right, that goes unrebutted is considered truth, right? That's why absent the indictment by a grand jury, absent the opportunity to confront the hearsay accusations that are against you in a fair and neutral proceeding in front of a fair and neutral decision maker, means that that affidavit stands as truth because it is unrebutted, right? Thus an irrebuttable presumption of guilt. So what happens with an irrebuttable presumption of guilt is that you, as the defendant, you have to go out and collect evidence to prove that you're innocent, right? It is no longer a prosecutor that has to prove that you're guilty. You now have to prove that you're innocent, which is a shift in the burden of proof. Normally, the prosecuting attorney in the state has to prove that you're guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. That's what we believe, that the state has to prove that you're guilty beyond a reasonable doubt because that's the burden of proof that's supposed to be in place. But that's not how it works, right? How it works is you are presumed guilty, and now the burden of proof is shifted. It's no longer the state that has to prove that you're guilty. It's now you that has to prove that you're innocent. This is the shift in the burden of proof. And according to Blackstone, this happens when there is a breakdown of due process because the system is focusing on speed and efficiency as opposed to established procedures and processes. According to Blackstone, anytime that you have an irrebuttable presumption of guilt, anytime you have a trial by affidavit, that is a breakdown of due process, right? As a result of the system focusing on how quickly we can push as many people through as possible, as opposed to how are we supposed to do this according to law, right? So now we can bridge across between what I'm doing with indictments and the criminal matter into the family matter. Because here's the thing, you guys. When you are charged by way of information, that judge presumes that you are guilty based upon someone accusing you of committing a crime. You aren't being given the opportunity to be presumed innocent until proven guilty because that judge says, oh, we've got information on you. Now we're going to order your arrest. We're going to hold you over for this crime, which means that the way or the behavior of the judiciary in a criminal matter is you are presumed guilty until proven innocent. You are presumed that you have committed a crime based upon someone accusing you of committing a crime. And if that is the behavior of a criminal court judge, then we could presume that the judges are being trained the same way in family court. Which means that if a judge in the criminal matter presumes that you're guilty because someone said you committed a crime, then I'm going to say that a family court judge presumes that you are unfit because someone said you were unfit. Right? It's the same behavior.
Makes sense.
Right? But the thing is that Blackstone doesn't talk about family court. It doesn't bring up this issue, this breakdown due process. It doesn't talk about it because family court is a relatively new animal within our legal system. but it does talk about the breakdown of due process with regard to criminal matters.
Is all criminal matters, do they all have the same burden? Beyond
Absolutely.
reasonable doubt? So
Here in
there's nothing-
America. So that's a great question, because not only is this a violation of the Constitution of the United States, the presumption of guilt, right, as opposed to presumption of innocence, not only is this a unconstitutional matter within our laws, but it is actually a violation of the international human rights standards, because the international human rights standards specifically state that you can never place the burden on the defendant to prove his innocence, because the system is already arrayed against him.
Right.
That would be an unacceptable measure that the defendant would have to reach, and yet here it is. 98% of all convictions come by way of a plea bargain, which how is any one of those people presumed innocent when you're not even being given the right to be able to confront the accusations against you because of the threats, intimidation, coercion, or duress that the system is applying upon you to get you to comply with their desired results, their
That's all
wills.
that's compliance.
So at the end of the day, these two issues are interrelated, but we have to show the behavior of the judiciary, right? And the way that we're doing it is through the indictment by a grand jury or the absence thereof. Because if the judiciary is teaching their judges to presume that these people are guilty based upon an accusation of committing a crime, then we could presume that the judiciary is teaching the family court judges the same way. And therefore, all of you are presumed unfit if someone accuses you of being unfit, particularly a government agent. If someone within government presumes...
Now, the lines are getting blurred because you see people going into family court to have a custody battle, and someone ends up getting arrested or charged with criminal contempt of court more and more frequently now, without having an opportunity for a trial, because it originally begins in a civil courtroom, and then the criminal contempt is slapped on there, and the person is treated as a criminal based on information and hearsay.
Yeah, so here's what happens there is that they're using the criminal court to advance the interests of the family court. So for instance, if they have a predetermined outcome, and that predetermined outcome is that your husband is going to get all of the marital property, he's going to get sole custody of the kids, and so on and so on and so on, right? Everything's going to go in his favor because that's what the judge has already determined. That's what the state has already determined. For whatever reason, we're not going to go into the factors. But at the end of the day, once they have the predetermined outcome, then they'll use the criminal court to advance the family court matter. So if you're being rebellious to them, right, and not just accepting whatever fate they give to you, then what they'll do is they will accuse you of criminal contempt. Because the moment that they put you into jail, you're not able to attend your divorce proceedings or your child custody hearings or any of these other things, which means that whatever allegations are presented or laid within that court, it's going unrebutted, which means that they can terminate your parental rights because where's the defendant to defend himself, right? Where's the respondent? So if you're challenging the system, then they're going to use the criminal court to advance it, because the moment that they lock you up, they can control the narrative now. You're not there to be able to confront the accusations against you, and now the state can have whatever disposition for the predetermined outcome that they want. This is the sick, but once again, these judges are interchangeable. A family court judge is used in the criminal matters, and so if they're trained to do things a certain way, then we could presume that they're all trained in the same way, right?
Correct.
So the absence of the indictment by a grand jury, the charging by way of information, is so interrelated with this family court issue. Yeah. Hey, Tina, keep your chin up there. Do we have your affidavit? Yeah.
The information, I'm going to research Blackstone now. I've got to go because
Tina.
I'll be off in less than a minute. And I applaud you guys, and I'm 100% ready and willing to volunteer whenever my sentence is up to get whatever accomplished that we can for the justice to be served in this country.
Tina, what's your last name?
You're amazing.
What's your last name,
My
Tina?
last name is Ayers, Tina Ayers. My whole story is on parentalrights.alabama on YouTube.
Parentalrights.alabama on YouTube. And you're in for
Parental rights.
700 days?
760.
793 days criminal contempt.
Unreal.
To the family court.
Bye,
Okay, so-
Tina. Love you.
So Tina just said,
I'll be in touch, Jessica. You guys have an awesome evening. Keep going strong, okay?
Thanks, you too.
So Tina just said that she got sentenced to 793 days for criminal contempt for posting things on Facebook that was
It says you don't blow anybody up or anything.
no, yeah, it was, we don't want to say anything.
We're not we're ever going to say that.
So,
That's so
but-
crazy.
But so she was posting information that was adverse to the opposing party. The government was controlling the narrative, but nonetheless, she got sent to prison for 793 days. Now let's break down the Fifth Amendment, the indictment by a grand jury, Clause 1 of Amendment 5. What it says is that no person shall be held to answer for a capital or otherwise infamous crime unless on presentment or indictment by a grand jury. Now that's clear. You must have an indictment by a grand jury before arresting someone and holding them over for a capital or an infamous crime. A capital crime is any crime punishable by a death. It's pretty easy. An infamous crime is a little bit more difficult. It is defined by Title 18, subsection 4083 as any crime punishable by more than 1 year imprisonment in a penitentiary, right? So if you can get more than 1 year, a year and a day, that is an infamous crime triggering the requirement for the indictment by a grand jury. Now bear in mind, it's not the amount of time that you get sentenced to, but the amount of time you can be sentenced to. That's United States versus Coachman, United States Supreme Court. Because the Constitution says no one can be held to answer. So it's the moment that they arrest you and hold you over for that crime that determines the infamous nature of the crime. So if you only get 3 months, but you could have gotten 2 years, it is still an infamous crime requiring the indictment by a grand jury. Now, what's important here is that it's the moment that you're arrested, right? Held to answer for that crime. So she was just arrested on criminal contempt and sentenced to 793 days. And let me ask you guys, is that an infamous crime? Absolutely it is, because she got 2 years. Right? 365 days in a year. So she got almost 2 years sentenced. That was an infamous crime, and yet she never received an indictment by grand jury. Charged by felony information. Felony information. You can't have felony information and have it be in compliance with the Constitution of the United States of America. Now, it doesn't matter why Alabama created the law or who told Alabama you can amend the law. What matters is what the Constitution says. And the Constitution does not permit an infamous crime be charged by any way other than a presentment to a grand jury or an indictment from a grand jury. Because no person shall be held to answer for a capital or otherwise infamous crime unless on presentment or indictment by a grand jury. That's clear. So this indictment issue, right? This indictment issue is so important because all of these parents that are getting arrested on arbitrary or capricious allegations by an opposing party that has no desire other than to advance their interest, right? To preserve their relationship with their child by poisoning the relationship of the opposing parent, by stealing all the marital property and assets. That's their desired outcome. And you think that they'll stop for 1 second to not accuse you of some horrible, heinous thing, or not, maybe even not heinous, of breaking a court order, right? And now you're going to go to prison. Tina's sitting there for 2 years. She doesn't have the opportunity to go into a custody hearing to defend herself and her right to have a relationship with her child. And as a result, that court is going to administratively TPR her because of what they've done to her by saying, oh, you didn't obey the orders from this court.
And then in case of like parental alienation, so you're now taken away from somebody for 6 months, 3 months, and that's just more time compounded that you have to try to figure out how the heck to do it.
Right. And the courts will typically say that once you're not in contact with your children for more than 6 months, regardless of why, because they control the narrative, regardless of why, they'll say, oh, that's abandonment now.
Yeah.
So she's sitting in jail for 2 years, right? And she's gonna get out, and she's not gonna be able to have a relationship with her children because of what they did to her to control the narrative and and control the free speech by restricting it and then saying, well, we're going to use the criminal matter to punish you for this family court issue. And then likewise, we're going to abridge your fundamental rights of a relationship with your child. We're going to abridge your fundamental rights of using your property, having your property, all these things that the Constitution protects. We're going to take all of them away simply because you weren't present to defend yourself.
Well, Tanawah, I think it comes down to them, as soon as they know that a parent is speaking out against what they're doing within the family court system, they want to shut that down. So they're going to start punishing you, and they might start with little punishments, and over time, this is the court system doing this.
Little warnings here
Little
and there.
warnings, and then eventually, you know, they come in hard.
Yeah.
And because they don't want people to know what they're doing. They just don't.
Yeah, you know, I brought this up a few times, and I want to say that if a judge is coming after you, then I'm going to tell you, welcome to the family, because you're on the right side. All right, and the reason why I say that is this: is that the last thing I ever wrote to the Supreme Court of the United States, in the last motion that I ever submitted to them, the very last paragraph, because I realized that they don't play by the same rules that we have to play by, right? They don't abide by the very rules that we, and so as a result, why will I continue to play by their rules with a system that doesn't adhere to their own rules? I'm not going to ask a criminal to stop committing crimes. That's when I decided it was necessary for me to go in and start fighting this asymmetrically, fighting this in places and ways that they would never expect, right? And so that's what I ended up doing. But the last thing I wrote to the Supreme Court was this. I said every single thing that I'm advocating is consistent with God's divine attributes. Release of prisoners, return of exiled captives, love in lieu of hate, compassion, not condemnation, forgiveness instead of vengeance, equity and not tyranny. I know what side I'm on. So ask yourself, if I fight for God and you fight against me, who is it that you are fighting for? Right? I know what God wants. I can open up the Bible to Isaiah 10 and I can say, okay, he says, lighten the yoke of those that work for you. The system, what do they say? You say, oh no, there are slaves, right? They say, God says that your sins have been forgiven. They say, oh no, we're going to label you a felon for the rest of your life. Right. God says, bring them out in the light. They say, no, we're going to put them in a dark cell, right? So every single thing that I'm asking for is not over the top. It's just simply what the Bible says to do. It scares me too to say that we're going to let a whole bunch of these prisoners out. But that's what God says needs to be done. And I trust God. I do. I trust what he says to do, right? Because he's never failed me, right, in my path. And so at the end of the day, I know what side I'm on. So anybody that fights with me or argues with me, I know what side they're on too, instantly. And that's why if anybody comes sideways with me, I just block you. It's just done, because I don't have time to be able to descend into anybody's negativity. I'm on a mission, I'm doing what I'm doing, and I'm going to continue to do it because I know that I'm on the right path, right? And there's lots of people that support and believe in what I'm doing because I believe in nothing more than this country and the laws that establish this country, and that's what I'm fighting for. But if I fight for the Constitution, then those judges, they all fight against me. Ask yourself, who is it that they're fighting for? Because they're not fighting for the Constitution when they're fighting against me. So when they say, we're going to lock these people up, when they say we're going to enslave these people, I'm going to say they're not on the right side, right?
But it's the same way when they're fighting against Amy and they're fighting against Doug and,
Yeah.
and everybody else. I'm sorry, John.
Yeah.
I've been Doug a couple times.
And so that's
Jen.
and that's my point, is that I've been able to discern between spirits, understanding that if a judge is coming against you,
I put Doug on there.
oh, so if a judge is coming against you, it's because you have the spirit of truth. So think of it like this, right? Every single judge is a liar. We know that because every single judge is committing perjury. I don't think that anybody is going to argue that truth. Every single judge in America is committing perjury, and perjury is the effect of telling a lie. Therefore, every single judge is a liar. It's as simple as that. And if you're filled with the spirit of lies, right, then that means that when two people walk into the courtroom, one is filled with the spirit of truth, one's telling the truth, the other one's telling a lie, that judge is naturally going to feel comfortable with the one telling the lie. They're not going to feel comfortable with the one telling the truth because the spirits are in conflict with one another. Which is why, in most cases, I believe that the judge is siding with the wrong party because that's what makes them feel comfortable. If someone comes in telling the truth, that judge is going to say, oh no, deep down inside in their heart, they're going to say, oh no, this person is a liar because they don't realize that they themselves are a liar. Therefore, if a judge is coming against you, welcome to the family. You're on the right side.
I mean, why would anybody ever want to make a decision on something and not have any responsibility for it? Like,
Right.
that makes just break it down to like the smallest thing ever. It's like, I'm making a decision
Oh,
to
the
get
no immunity you're talking about. That they have no
to
immunity.
make a decision or that, or even God. It's like, I'm gonna make a decision on this, but I'm not gonna deal with it when she's got to go to rehab, or when that decision really turned really bad for that person. It's like, why? Then that's probably a decision you can't make and shouldn't make. So that's like real simple.
Yeah.
Okay, we got a question. It's a good question about assets. So
Okay.
this is Nicole. She's calling in from Ohio, I believe.
Hi, Nicole. OH.
Hi.
OH.
Thank you for taking my call. My question is, when it comes to making someone a beneficiary for a representative payee for SSDI when the parent is disabled, without any warning, is that criminal or civil? Same thing with child support. There's no warning. They don't tell you where the money goes. They don't tell you how to get it back.
So I haven't hit the child support stuff really hard yet because I just haven't. But again, these are still interrelated. Okay, so how do I start this? So the Constitution of the United States, it provides a separation of powers, right? It limits our government to certain confined responsibilities within each branch, okay? So the first branch of government, Article 1, is the legislative branch. According to the Constitution, all taxes must originate from the legislative branch. All debt must originate from the legislative branch. Neither the judicial branch nor the executive branch can create a debt against the people because only the people wanted to control whether or not we were going to be taxed because the whole basis of the Revolutionary War was taxation without representation. Therefore, we hermetically sealed the responsibility for creating the debt against the people to the legislative branch. So again, a judge has no authority to create a debt against you, right? And hey, Jess, will you check my phone too and make sure that it doesn't need to be like.
Okay.
So
They do it not that they're not involved in the court. Like in my county, the agency can seize.
well,
They can make in my county they can make themselves the payee or the foster care payee without having to go to court.
yeah. So
The payee.
So here's my point. Is that a judge can't create the debt against the people, nor can a member of the administrative branch create a debt against the people because they're part of the executive branch. Only the legislative branch can create a debt or a tax against the people. In a courtroom, all three branches are represented. Now, we don't know about the third branch because we never see it. The first branch is the judge, judicial. The second branch would be the agency, right? Which would be prosecutor, the GAL, the attorney, because he's an administrative officer of the state, right? So the executive branch is represented by the opposed party. Now the legislative branch is represented by the jury. The jury is the legislative branch. So all debt must originate from the legislative branch. So in the case of, say, child support, that's why the Constitution says in the Sixth Amendment that all debt over $20 must have a trial by jury because you must have the legislative branch determine whether or not there's a debt. So if there's any debt above $20, it must go to a jury. That's why our founders did it that way, is because all debt against the people, all tax must originate from the legislative branch. So if there's not a trial by jury, and you're there for, say, a criminal matter, are you not there because you owe a debt to society? Right? It is a debt being created But when the prosecutor charges you by information, that is a debt originating from the executive branch.
When was this? You said $20. So my guess is it'd probably be like small claims court today, where it'd be a little bit more than $20 there, or should it?
No,
just
no, because the Constitution says $20. Duralex, sed lex. The law may be hard, but it's the law. We're not going to compromise on the law. The
That's
law
true.
says $20.
That's true. Once we start compromising,
Right.
where do we stop?
It says $20. So no. If we want to change that, the way I like to say it is that if, in the opinion of the people of the United States, any of the provisions that guarantees the Constitution be in any particular way wrong, then let it be corrected by an amendment in the way in which the Constitution so designates. Until, if and when that time comes, everybody is guaranteed everything that the Constitution says.
Makes sense.
Right? The people change it, and we don't compromise. Duralex, sed lex. It may be hard, but it's the law.
That's right.
Can I ask a question? The reason they make themselves payee is to cover the cost of the child being in foster care. So how does that work out when they're also getting paid through Title IV and everything else? So I guess it is a form. They're taking like I'm on disability, so my child's my beneficiary. They changed the payee to I don't know who and I don't know where it went to charge me for the cost of him being in foster care, right? But then again, there's the child support percentage rules or laws where they're not supposed to take a certain percentage, right, over or under, and that's like 3 times more than what the law says they can charge somebody for child support. And I guess my confusion is it civil or is it criminal? And, you know, like how do you? I mean, I understand the different branches and everything, but how would you even go about like addressing it, right?
No.
So I'm gonna go back to you guys know my background. I was special operations military. I spent 8 years doing it. Well, there's a military combat philosophy that whoever holds high ground has got superior tactical capability. If you're on high ground, then you have superior tactical. You're gonna win the war. If you can maintain high ground, you will win that war. So if the Constitution of the United States of America is the highest form of law, then when you get up on the highest form of law, you don't come down off of it to argue down in the weeds in case law or judge-made rulings where they want to draw you down into. Once you get up on the high ground, you stand on the high ground, you don't come down off of it. So when I say that in all matters exceeding $20, it requires a trial by jury, then they're going to say, oh yeah, but what about child support down here in the state statute? I'm going to say, oh no, in all matters of in excess of $20, requires a trial by jury. I'm going to keep drawing them up to my level, right? And in doing so, they can't fight at my level. So same thing with the indictment by a grand jury. If it says that no person shall be held to answer for a capital or otherwise infamous crime unless on presentment or indictment of a grand jury, then they're going to say, yeah, but look at Hurtado versus California, judge-made ruling. I'm going to say, I don't give a shit about your judgment ruling. No person shall be held to answer for a capital or otherwise infamous crime unless on presentment or indictment of a grand jury. I'm going to speak the words of the Constitution. I'm going to keep drawing them up to the Constitution's level because when I do, I maintain superior tactical capability and I'm going to draw them up to my level and I'm going to win because they can't fight at the level of the Constitution. Well, hang on. Hang on. I want to get to my point here. My point is that the things that you're talking about can be addressed by the constitutional provision of they didn't have the authority to create the debt against you. Right? We don't need to talk about those things because they didn't have the authority to create the debt against you because there was no jury trial to create the debt. So we can get rid of your argument by raising up to the constitutional level and saying this is the constitutional provision that protects me from you creating child support against me, or this is the constitutional provision that protects me from you giving me a speeding ticket. Because in all matters in excess of $20, it requires a trial by jury because only the legislative branch can create it. So we don't got to talk about the lower level issues because we can rise up to the highest form of law and say, you never had the authority to create that debt against me. And now we don't have to worry about the down in the weeds issues where they typically win. We want to get up on the highest form of law.
They use child support too, that's separate. I'm keeping that separate. But in like Social Security, when I look up that information, the federal level, it says if the court is told it's not in the best interest of the child to inform the parents that we're going to seize their assets. And I'm not saying, like, that's where I get confused because how do you get around that, not mention that at all, just go straight to the Constitution and they come back and say, well, here it says we don't have to tell you, even though they're supposed to prove it's not in the best interest. How do you know that they even
So-
Whereas in civil is where I get confused because you can't really, what's our back the way?
So we can still draw it back to the Constitution. Because if the Supreme Court of the United States, if the Supreme Court of the United States incorporated your right to have a relationship with your child without governmental interference in 1984, such as they did in Roberts versus United States, then what I'm going to say is that they didn't have the authority to take the children, right, or interfere with that relationship. Thus we've mitigated, the issue of clear and convincing evidence of abuse or whatever else, because they don't have the authority to do it. You see, there's two sources of all injustice here in America. Two. One is called oppression and the other is called tyranny, right? And you need to know what those two things, everyone, you all need to know. Tyranny and oppression are the basis of all of your injustice. Oppression is the creation of a law that affects one part of our society differently than another part of our society. So if a state creates a law that says that we're going to, whatever, they create a law that only affects one part of our society and not another part, that would be an oppressive law,
right,
and it would be in violation of our Constitution. Because the Constitution requires the law to apply equally amongst every single person. That is the egalitarianism form of government that we live within. So no state can create a law that affects one party and not another. 14th Amendment, Article 4, they both say the same thing, that the citizens in each state shall be entitled to all privileges and immunities as the citizens in the several states. Meaning that no state can create a law that would deprive you of a privilege or immunity that you would enjoy within a different state. Thus, we must apply the law equally amongst all states. Also, the 14th Amendment, where it says that no state shall create or enforce any law that does not provide equal protection of the law. The law must apply equally to every single person. Thus, oppression is unconstitutional because you can't create a law that affects one party and not another.
What if you're under 18?
So it doesn't matter because the law actually says no person, right? No person. And this kind of goes back to what Trump is doing right now and the illegitimate nature of it. And I'm not going to argue with anybody about your feelings on the homelessness. But what I'm going to say is that you cannot punish someone for being poor.
That's right.
I don't give a shit. You cannot punish someone for being poor. It already sucks to be homeless, right? It already sucks to not have money. And so when you criminalize them for no reason other than the fact that they're homeless, right? Or in other words, you say either find a different place to be or we're going to arrest you and send you to jail, right? That's not constitutional. That's not lawful. Because the Constitution doesn't say all United States citizens. What it says is all persons within the jurisdiction of the United States shall enjoy fair and equal application of laws. That is Title 42, subsection 1981. All persons within the jurisdiction of the United States shall have fair and equal benefits of all laws and all proceedings. And so the question would be, like for instance, the immigration issue, are these illegals, are they persons? Because if they are, the Constitution protects them. And that was even decided by the Supreme Court in 2004. That's not even coming from me. That's coming from the United States Supreme Court. 2004 said that all persons within the purview of the United States of America that's subject to our system is in fact protected by the Constitution. You cannot be arrested here in America and not have the Constitution apply to you. Because the law says all persons, not all citizens, all persons, right? So my answer to that is that is a child any less of a person than an adult? Is a child any less of a person than an illegal immigrant? Right? No. Children are still people, and those people still have rights. And those rights are protected by the Constitution of the United States of America. It doesn't matter how old they are, doesn't matter where they choose to reside within the jurisdiction of the United States, doesn't matter whether they're here legally or not. If you are subjected to our system, then you are protected by the Constitution of the United States of America. Period.
So it's almost like the state laws are more oppressive laws. For where they say like they can't drink or things, they set up guardrails or whatever, or
So Justice Kennedy, I have a video out on TikTok with Justice Kennedy that's grilling a couple of people, and he talks about that. He's like, yeah, well, is the state able to create a law that's contrary to the Constitution? And this judge candidate is like, well, no, they can't. And I agree with that. You see, the Constitution is the overarching requirements. States can't abridge those limitations of power. But what they can do is they can exceed those limitations of power. And let me give you an example, okay? So the Constitution says that the right to trial by jury shall be preserved. The right to trial by jury shall be preserved. That means that every state must adjudicate a matter by a trial by jury, right? So every state must do that. Now I know that they don't, but it says the Constitution protects that. That is a limitation. So let's understand that. Every state must have a trial by jury. However, if a state has a trial by jury, then they could independently make a determination as to the function of that jury. Like they might say, okay, we have 12 jurors, and we only need 9 to determine guilt, right? Or we need all of them to determine guilt. As long as you got a trial by jury, they can determine the function of that jury, right? The administrative function, a state could do that, but the state cannot impair the basic fundamental obligations or limitations of that. So the Constitution says, the Constitution doesn't say you have to have unanimous jury consent, although I would believe that you should, and most states do create a law that says that, but that is a procedural element that enforces the limitation codified in the Constitution of the United States. No state can remove the trial by jury. That would be unconstitutional. But states can determine the application or the procedural process for that, and that can differentiate from state to state, right? I would agree that it should be unanimous, right? But the Constitution doesn't say that. So once again, dura lex sed lex, right? It may be hard, but it's the law, right? So we're not going to compromise the law. That means that the states must do what the Constitution says, because that's the limitations of power, to preserve the individual liberties of the people. States can't remove it, but they can exceed it, or they can determine the function. But the problem is the Constitution says no person shall be held to answer for a capital or otherwise infamous crime unless on presentment or indictment of a grand jury. And yet here in the state of Connecticut, they removed the grand jury from the proceeding in 1984. They removed grand jury. The state of Connecticut does not conduct a grand jury at all. How is that not removing the fundamental rights and limitations of the state in order to proceed in an arbitrary and capricious manner in violation of the Constitution of the United States? And it's not just Connecticut. It's also Pennsylvania. It's also Michigan. It's also North Dakota. It's also Washington. These are states that did remove the fundamental limitations of the Constitution in order to enact their own laws that are contrary to what the Constitution protects. That is not exceeding it. That is eliminating it. And that is the issue that we're dealing with here.
Yeah.
Totally. And so relate that to family court, and then so how come I can't go to family court and say I want it? It's just not possible. It's just not done. Was it ever done? You said it's a newer court, 70 years old or something. So it's okay, did that just not come into there, or is it basically just because they don't have enough people to run it? And they're already behind, and they need their union breaks.
So again, this goes back to the judiciary, right? So in 1833. Well, let's go back before that. So the judiciary, right, its entire history, since the day that it started, of the first 28 Supreme Court justices that served on our court, 22 of them owned their own slaves, right? So of the first 28, 22 of them owned their own slaves. Now you guys know what progeny is, right? Progeny is a case that descends from another case. So for instance, it's precedent. So you set precedent, and now all the cases that would come from that precedent would be known as progeny. Okay? Now in common law, English common law, what happens is that judge-made rulings, case law, determines the future application of the law. Right? Now there's two different political structures, two different political theories, and they're in direct opposition. One is a government of laws doctrine, which is what we all believe we live with it. Government of laws is the belief that law is based upon a formal set of laws or principles in which the courts and people adhere to, and in which everyone is accustomed to. This is constitutionally based. Constitution at the foundation, and everything derives from it, right? Everything derives from the Constitution, meaning that Everything must be congruent with the Constitution. That's what we all believe in. We believe that we are governed by rule of law. You guys hear that, right? The senators, Congress, they all say, oh, the rule of law. We must follow the rule of law. Okay, the rule of law is that the people create the law, right? That we create it, and it must be consistent with the Constitution, and if it's not, it's unconstitutional. Doesn't matter if it's a United States congressional act. If it's contrary to the Constitution, unconstitutional. If it is a judge-made ruling, unconstitutional. State statute, unconstitutional. Anything that's contrary to the Constitution,
What about the president
unconstitutional.
says, we're going to do this by
Executive order.
Yeah.
Separation of powers. Judges or the president does not create law. They create orders. Those orders must be consistent with positive law because the president is tethered to positive law.
Okay.
Right? So we live in a world where we believe that the Constitution is the foundation and that we can look to it to understand the limitations of living within our society. That's the government of laws. Now, the opposite of government of laws doctrine is what's called legal realism. Now, legal realism is the belief that law is not based upon a formal set of rules or principles, but instead upon judicial decisions that derive from their own social, political, or public policy. That means that judges create the law, not the people. That is the exact opposite of constitutionalism. All right. What do we got going on here?
So that means you can have a political judge and be the same adjudicator.
Right. So judges create the law based upon their own social, political, or public policy. We gotta probably. No, you're still good. Okay. So that means that judges create the law based upon their own social, political, public policy. That means that judges are able to create the law, amend the law, including the Constitution of the United States. They're able to make those amendments based upon their own social, political, or public policy. Now, we know that we live in a world of legal realism. And the reason why we know that is because if I walk into a courtroom and I say, Judge, my right to indict by grand jury has been violated. I was supposed to have an indictment by a grand jury before arresting me, and therefore my constitutional rights have been violated. Where does that judge go to determine whether or not your rights were violated? Does he go to the Constitution, to the object of which his fidelity is bound, or does he go to a judge-made ruling, the opposite of constitutionalism, right? Does he go to the flawed decision of the flawed man that came before him, or the flawed man that came before him?
The state statute.
State statute, right? So he's going to the lowest form of law, a judge-made ruling, to determine whether or not our highest form of law has been violated, which means that judges determine the law. They create it based upon their own social, political, or public policy. That's not the world that we're supposed to live in. The reason why is because, once again, here in America, judges don't make law. So we the people did not delegate the authority for judges to create law. That's because all legislative power is vested in Congress of the United States. That's Clause 1, Article 1 of the Constitution. Judges have no authority to create law. So when they do create judge-made rulings and erroneously and unconstitutionally call it law, then that would be unconstitutional, right? Because we didn't delegate the authority for judges to create law here in America.
Okay,
Yes.
we have, what is your name?
Jesse James.
Jesse James. Okay.
Jesse.
We have Jesse James. He has a question specific to what you were just talking about. You're on, Jesse.
You're good.
Hey,
Talk to
boss
him,
man, how
Kenny.
you doing tonight?
Good, brother. Good.
All right, so as it pertains to pretty much the abolishment of our 14th Amendment, my public pretender informed me that this is because of the slaughterhouse cases of 1873, and I was wondering if that was part of your litigation in the Supreme Court to try to get that overturned.
So here's the thing. If we can show that the judiciary introduced fraud, right? At whatever point the judiciary introduced fraud, everything after that, all the progeny, which is what I was just talking about, all the progeny would be removed. So we all know that fraud vitiates any action, and that fraud remains in place until the fraud is removed, meaning that nothing that the court does is valid until the fraud is removed. So let's take a look at 1833. In 1833, the United States Supreme Court came out in a case called Barron versus Baltimore, and they said in that case, they said that the Bill of Rights, which are the first 10 amendments, that those are not a restriction against the state governments. That is only a restriction against the federal government. Okay? So the Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments, that the states are not restricted by the Bill of Rights, only the federal government is. What happened there is that as of that moment, all of the rights that we have contained within the Bill of Rights, they didn't exist at the state level. You had no right to freedom of speech. You had no right to a jury trial or a grand jury or any of these other things that we believe we had starting in 1833, because the judiciary said, no, states don't have to follow it. That's not a restriction of the state government. That's only a restriction against federal governments. Now, the Supreme Court didn't make that decision because it was the right thing. They didn't make that decision because it was equitable and just. They made that decision because 6 months later, they established the First National Bank. First National Bank.
Money.
So the federal government created the First National Bank, the bank that Andrew Jackson destroyed in his presidency. Now, why did the Supreme Court do that? Well, they are paving the way for that national bank, and the reason why is because to have standing in federal court, you must, one, be directly impacted by the law in question. If you are not impacted by the law in question, you have no standing in federal court, therefore the court does not have to hear your case, and two, you have to be a person, right? Mm-hmm. So once they established the national bank, if the Constitution doesn't apply to them, such as they stated in Barron v. Baltimore, guess what? States, you don't have standing. You can't sue. Go away. National Bank was put into place. What Marshall was doing there was paving the way for that national bank to be established. That's all it was. It was for no reason other than they wanted to protect the central government to keep them from being sued by the states the moment that they set up the national bank. But here's the problem. Here's the problem. 1833, Supreme Court comes out and says, Bill of Rights doesn't apply to states. That's what they said. Bill of Rights doesn't apply to states. Well, we know that's bullshit. Absolutely we know that's bullshit, right? I mean, look at Article 6, right? This constitutional law is the United States, and the supreme law of the land, and the judges in every state shall be bound thereby anything in the Constitution or laws of any state contrary notwithstanding. To what purpose was the Constitution if it was not the supreme law of the land governing and overseeing the limitations of power by the states? So guys, this is simple civics, man. This is like third grade civics, that the purpose of the Bill of Rights was to protect the people, and the people live in the states, right? 1833. So the whole point here is that unfortunately the Supreme Court of the United States introduced fraud. Yours is up there. It needs to be reconnected.
Thank you.
So the Supreme Court of the United States introduced fraud into the system in 1833. Introduced fraud. And as of that moment, what the Supreme Court did was that it was straight down its power. Straight down.
There it is.
So everything from that moment on.
Until the fraud is removed, nothing that the court does is valid. But here's the caveat to that. Here's the caveat. And that is that the Supreme Court of the United States provides the overarching requirement. They dictate the actions and procedures and behavior of every single court in the entire country, right? So if the highest court in the land introduced fraud that directed all the lower courts in the land that they don't have to follow the Constitution, then that would mean that by that fraud introduced by the highest court in the land, nothing any court in the country is doing until that fraud is removed. Now here's the issue with the fraud. Okay, here's the issue with the fraud. So 1833, Barron v. Baltimore is established. Fraud is introduced. Every court in the country is told you don't have to give the people the rights that they're guaranteed by the Bill of Rights. It wasn't until 1925 that anyone was protected by any of the rights contained and enumerated within the Bill of Rights. That was a case called Gitlow versus New York. Gitlow versus New York. It was a freedom of speech. So what Gitlow did was, so Gitlow came forward and said, hey, I have the freedom of speech. New York can't interfere with this. And the Supreme Court of the United States in 1925 said, oh yeah, you are, because it's written in the Constitution. They said that the freedom of speech is protected against interference because it's in the Constitution's text. So all of a sudden, 1925, we at the state level is protected for the freedom of speech because it's in the Constitution's text. So if you can imagine, 1776, we come out and we say, oh, we have the freedom of speech and we have the freedom to worship and all these other things, and yet it wasn't until 1925 that any person within America was actually, But the problem is that in 1925, you would think that if the Supreme Court of the United States said, oh yeah, it's written right there, you're protected by it, that we would be protected by all of the provisions within the Bill of Rights. But that's not how it worked. So 1925, Gitlow versus New York started what's called the Incorporation Doctrine. Incorporation Doctrine. And what happened there was that one at a time, the Supreme Court of the United States heard a case, and then they incorporated each of the provisions within the Bill of Rights one at a time. A good example would be Miranda versus Arizona, right? Miranda versus Arizona incorporated the right to not self-incriminate, that no person shall, right? So the right to self-incriminate was incorporated by Miranda versus Arizona. Another one would be Gideon versus Wainwright. Another one would be Duncan versus Louisiana. That was the right to trial by jury. So, and that was 1969, was Duncan versus Louisiana. But at the end of the day, 1925 started the incorporation doctrine. And then one at a time, the Supreme Court started hearing cases and incorporating them into federal protection, one at a time. Now my point here is that the last provision to be incorporated, the last one incorporated was in 2019, a case called Timms versus Indiana. You guys, you've already heard me talk about this Timms versus Indiana case, right? Because this was the last one to be incorporated. Timms versus Indiana incorporated the excessive fines clause of the 8th Amendment, right? Because Timms was challenged and said, hey, you know, this is excessive fine, what state of Indiana has given me. Therefore, they challenged the state of Indiana under the excessive fines clause. And the Supreme Court of the United States came out and they said in a unanimous ruling that the privileges and immunities of United States citizens are at a minimum those enumerated within the Bill of Rights, given their legal effect against interference by the states, because they're codified in the Constitution's text. So this is a long roundabout way of saying that, guys, there is one provision left to be incorporated. One provision. Every other provision in the Bill of Rights has been incorporated except for one. And can you guys guess which one that is? Grand jury clause of the 5th Amendment. This is the last provision to be incorporated. Once we incorporate this provision, every single one of them have been incorporated. This is the first time, once we get the grand jury clause incorporated for the first time in the history of our country, every single person will be protected by every single right secured by and enumerated in the Constitution, regardless of where they choose to reside within the jurisdiction of the United States. This is why this is such a huge deal, because never in the history of our country has anyone ever been protected by the entire Bill of Rights. This is the last one to be incorporated. But what happens now is that the moment we incorporate this, then we can go back to Barron versus Baltimore and we can say, look at that fraud that the Supreme Court of the United States introduced that directed every court in the country that they don't have to follow the Constitution, and that means that every case that's progeny to Barron versus Baltimore would be void, without force or effect, because of the fraud introduced by the highest court in the land. So that means that if...
Then they have to pay damages.
Well, I mean, I'm not going into damages. That's something the attorneys do. I do substantive law. I fight for the crimes and the criminality of it. But you guys, if the Supreme Court of the United States decided that they're going to direct every court in the country to act unlawfully, unconstitutionally,
Right.
then until the Supreme Court comes out and tells all of the courts within its purview, no, you have to act constitutionally, nothing any court does can be constitutional. And that means that nothing any of these courts are doing is valid right now. None of the judgments or actions that they're doing is valid. And that's why the Supreme Court really needs to pull its head out of its ass and understand that you know, that you
Why don't we
guys...
get it up there? Why don't we get it up there? That's like, any one of us can do that.
Get it up there. It's got to be lobbied first. We have to have more people behind us. I know that affidavits are falling like water into your lap, but it's still not enough.
Right. So you know, ultimately the decision is going to come from the court. You guys, yeah. We could push a case into there. I have the case. It's sitting there, right? We're there on a jurisdictional error, and I can push it into that court at any moment. But the problem is that I'm not going to go early on this, you guys. I'm going to go the moment that this is about timing.
Gotcha.
Because the problem is that if we introduce it too early, then that court's going to ignore it. They're just going to abstain. They're going to ignore it. We're not going to have the power and the momentum to make them have to hear it.
What makes them open the door? We
We have to have momentum so they get run over, but it is like what you said, brother. We have to wait for that appointed time.
Yeah. So the battle spot in the opinion of the public, right?
battle spot, so it has to be lobby.
No, I wouldn't say lobby because lobby is implying.
We're not lobbying. We're advocating for our rights
So-
as an American, as a human
so-
being, as an individual.
But how do we get people to care about that? See, that's the problem. People are so comfortable in their comfortableness because they don't have to deal with this.
Lovers of themselves and lovers of money.
Exactly,
So-
Jesse.
So let me point this out to you guys that everybody I talk to understands what I'm saying, right? State cannot create a law, substitute it for the guarantees of the Constitution, and go out and enforce it.
Right.
It doesn't matter who it is, whether you've been involved in the system, whether you've had children taken from you, everybody understands that basic premise. So when I go to these city hall meetings or these county commissioner meetings and I speak on the record and I say the state of whatever has created a law that is contrary to the Constitution and is directing all of these public officials to go out and enforce this law in violation of the Constitution, every person in that room understands what I'm saying,
Of course.
right? They understand it.
Intrinsically,
Right.
almost.
And these numbers are going up because we were just in Allentown, Pennsylvania just the other day. We had almost 300 people in the audience. When we were in Mecklenburg, they had an overflow, right? Which was another 350 people. So, we're getting up and we're explaining this to hundreds of people all at once. Most of whom probably have never been arrested, but all of whom understand what it is that we're saying. Because, a state can't create a law. So my point is that again, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to lead. Guys, I didn't ask for this. I don't like being a leader. I'm a Sigma. I'm a Sigma male. I like to just stand back and be quiet. I don't want attention on me. But at the end of the day, I believe that the best leader is one that gets out and leads and shows the way. Which is why I'm out here doing what I'm doing. I'm just trying to show you guys that you can step up and you can speak out against the city. You can speak out against the county. You can do these things, right? And they won't do nothing to you because you have the right to respectfully stand up and redress your grievances to them.
Right.
So again, if you guys want to help, we have a 2-page script ready to be read. This is what Jess reads every single day in these meetings. A 2-page script. You can get up, you can read that 2-page script, you can tell them that you are no longer going to pay people to commit crimes. You can say that on that script, and then you can take the 4-page notice that I have prepared, and you can give it to the city clerk, and now you are putting it into their hands and saying, what do you want to do? Because the difference between today and tomorrow is negligence to willful criminal conduct. Because if I put it on the record and I tell you that these people are acting unconstitutionally and you're paying them to act unconstitutionally, then as of that moment, they have a choice. They can either, 1, continue to pay them to commit crimes, or 2, they can stop paying them and direct them to act in a constitutional manner. Those are the choices that they have. And I know that we're not seeing momentum yet, but at the end of the day, this is an independent question that we got to ask everyone. Like I said a year and a half ago in the Eye of the Storm interview that I did, all that I'm doing is I'm drawing a line in the sand. And I'm saying, this is what the law states. You guys are clearly operating outside of that law. And you can either, 1, continue to act unlawfully, in which case we're going to make sure the whole world knows the criminals and traitors that you are, or 2, you can return to established rule of law and we can work together to fix this. But there is no middle ground. There's no other option. You either, 1, obey the law, or 2, you're a criminal. Because the definition of a criminal is one that transgresses the law. It doesn't matter what that law is. If the law is the Constitution, you're transgressing it, you're a traitor, right? If you swore an oath to do it, then you're committing treason. But if you don't want to be known as that, then you can return to the law, and we can work together to fix the
What if
problem.
you're a traitor of one of the state statutes? I laugh because I think about custodial interference, right? They refuse to enforce that for some reason. And then now they're like a double traitor, right?
So that's a decision that they're going to have to make. I mean, we talk about, we're trying to connect, reconnect here.
We're down on
1.
I mean, to be honest, the reason why it's going to be so hard is because
There it goes.
we're basically threatening these people's life if they continue the comfortable path that they've been.
What? No. Let's not say that. We're not threatening anyone's life. All that we're
Not directly, but if we're.
all that we're doing.
Charging them with treason.
Well, we're not charging them. So what I have, you guys, these criminal affidavits. An affidavit is prima facie evidence of a crime, right? But these affidavits are for a per se crime. So public officials, they don't get the same burden of proof that the people do, right? Like we're supposed to be innocent until proven guilty. The burden of proof is on the state to prove that we're guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. But for a public official, they don't have the same burden of proof. They have what's called per se crimes. Because if I have an obligation and I promise to fulfill a future outcome, I said that I'll do what the Constitution says by oath or affirmation, then if I fail to do it, I've already implicitly invited punishment. I've already said I will be guilty of perjury should I fail to fulfill such promise. So when it comes to a per se crime, all you have to do is show that they had an obligation to do something and they failed to fulfill that obligation, and now they're already guilty. That's why the burden of proof is much lower for a public official.
So I think I'm getting this. So all these punishments are going to kind of reset, and they're not going to be like 400 years in jail for stealing a Snickers.
So this is why I'm trying to draw it back. So where government acts unlawfully, there cannot be guilt, right? That's why I say that I'm not saying that anyone's innocent. I don't know if they're innocent, right?
Right.
But that's not my job. That was the state's job to determine guilt. But guilt is a process, and if you don't follow that process, then there cannot be guilt. 2 Thessalonians says this.
No matter what.
2 Thessalonians says it. It says where there's unlawfulness, right? Where there's the man of lawlessness, there cannot be guilt. Because you must follow the law to determine someone's guilt. So if government is not obeying the law, then what I can say is that these people aren't guilty. They may not be innocent, but I know that they're not guilty. So I'm not fighting for anyone's innocence. I'm fighting for their guilt. And I'm saying there is no guilt because wrong will always produce wrong. Only right can produce right. If you follow the rules, then you can have a lawful outcome. But if you don't follow the law, right, any unlawful act can never result in a lawful outcome. Ever, government. So if you're not following the Constitution and you're not obeying what the Constitution requires of you, then nothing that you produce is going to be valid because it all derives from your unlawful, unconstitutional acts. So what I'm saying here is that I can say without any doubt whatsoever that there isn't a single judgment against a person of the United States that's valid as of this moment because of the unlawful and unconstitutional acts of the judiciary. Nothing is valid. I'm not saying you guys are innocent. I'm not saying you guys are good people, but what I'm saying is that if our government's going to lead us toward unlawfulness, they are not going to hold us accountable for our unlawfulness because we're simply following them. That's why I say we've got to start with the leadership, get leaders into office that are going to obey the law out of love, faith, obedience, and respect for the will of the people.
Yeah.
And the laws that they establish, and until we have people that are going to lead us in a lawful direction, then the people can't be held accountable because of our government's own unlawfulness. Cannot do it. So what we're doing right now, right? What I'm doing, and what I would like to express to the prying eyes, because we know we've got people on my lives that we know shouldn't be here. But here's what I'm going to say. Here's what I'm going to say. You have the ability to mitigate your criminality, but it must come one of two ways. Because once you're notified that you are engaged in criminal conspiracy to undermine the laws of the United States, there's only two ways to mitigate your culpability. One is you must notify the authorities of the crimes. You must report the crimes, right? If you're aware that someone's breaking the law and you do nothing about it, you may as well be the very person pulling the trigger because you knew about it and you permitted it to continue, public officials. So when I walk into these city hall meetings, Mr. Mayor of Allentown, and I explain to you that your police officers are arresting people unconstitutionally, when you fail to take action, you are a member of that criminal conspiracy. because you did not notify the authorities of the crimes. And I'm going to tell you one step further that it's not even your officers that you would notify. It's not even the state that you would notify, because according to the law, the only agency that can investigate the crime of deprivation of rights under color of law is the FBI. That's the only one. So, Mr. Mayor, if you did not contact the FBI to report the crimes being committed by your police officers, you did not mitigate your culpability, and you are now a member of the criminal conspiracy, because any person who, having knowledge of any of the wrongs conspired to be done, and who have the power to prevent or aid in the prevention of commission of same, neglects or refuses to do so, may be joined and dispense the action. You didn't do what was necessary to mitigate your culpability by reporting the crimes to the proper authorities. That's number one. The second thing that you have to do is you must notify your co-conspirators of your intent to no longer participate. So, Mr. Mayor, if you didn't tell your police officers that you are no longer going to pay them to break the law and to violate the Constitution, you did not mitigate your criminality, and you are a member of the criminal conspiracy, and according to laws of criminal conspiracy, you are a member of that, and you will be joined as a defendant in that action when I bring this action forward. We have 2 million criminal affidavits from all across this country, every single state, of people that have been charged by way of information, not by indictment, in direct violation of the procedures and processes codified in the Constitution of the United States of America. These are capital crimes. These are per se crimes. All I have to do is show you were supposed to have an indictment by a grand jury and you didn't have it. Now you're guilty, period. So this is what you guys are facing. This is what you're facing. Look at Title 18, 2381, treason, right? All we have to do is, by witness of 2 or more persons of that overt act, we can do what's necessary. You guys know what the law states. I'm not going to repeat it. Right? You know what we can do to you. And we are fully, lawfully authorized to do so, because the people said that if we have traitors in office, we can remove them by force. That's what we said. That's what the law, it's not coming from me, it's coming from the law. So you guys need to understand the situation that you're facing here. Because when you start to oppress the people and you start to act tyrannical against the people, don't be surprised if the people do what's necessary to remove that oppression and that tyranny. All through history, we could see this is what happens to tyrants. They don't last very long.
We don't.
And so my point is that, guys, I know that it seems like this is a crazy situation, like this, like how could this ever happen, right? But at the end of the day, what we are trying to do is we are trying to tip the scales. Right now, the scales are tipped heavily in favor of government, because we're all together,
Right.
And no one's coming across because they're all scared to come across. They don't want to be the first one to do it. But the moment we get that first one to step across, the moment that first senator says, you know what, he's right, I don't want to be a traitor. He's right. I want to support the Constitution. That first congressman we get, that first senator we get, that first judge we get, guess what? It's going to open up the floodgates for them. They're going to come across by the droves, and we're going to tip the scales in our favor. But we got to get that first one. We got to find that first one.
He's there.
We got to find it, right? But as soon as we find that first one, they will start coming across. And once they get onto our side of the scales, we will see them come across in the droves, because they're just waiting for that first one to show the way. And that's why we're creating this pressure. That's why I'm going out here and I'm informing them, because they all know what they're doing. They all know that I'm right. They've all read these affidavits. These judges and these prosecutors, these attorneys, they all know that I'm right. And once we get this first one, once we get that first one to come across, the moment we do, we are going to see them come across by the droves. And what will happen there is the scales will tip in our favor. And the moment that the scales tip in our favor is the moment that we return to the Supreme Court and the court will hear this case.
And this is why I gotta go, okay, family court, I know you're being a tyrant to me, but I got something else to do to get to them. Because this will do it faster than me worrying about what's going on in family court. Because it's just way too far down. And that makes a lot of sense to me. So
because this is
if I wanted to stop for my children, which is what I'm saying I want. And by God, that's what I want. I don't want another generation to suffer from the family court. That's what God has told me.
Yeah.
So I got to do something else, which blows me away.
So again, all that we need is we need the first public official to come out in public support of this. To come out and say, the Constitution says it, we do have to do it. And once we get that first one, it's going to be dominoes. Because what will happen then is that they're going to realize, as of that moment, that they are committing treason. And they won't want to, because they won't want to lose their lives over the business, right? So they're going to come across. But again, the only way that they can do it. So whoever this public official is, I hope that they're watching tonight, and I hope that they're teetering, right? But whoever that might be, you must understand that there's two things that you have to do to mitigate your culpability. One is you must notify the authorities of the crimes, meaning you must contact the FBI and you must make the FBI to take action to investigate this particular crime. FBI doesn't want to do it, but you have to notify the FBI because it's the only agency that can investigate it. If you don't, you're not mitigating your culpability. Don't call up the Attorney General, right? Don't call up, the governor. Don't call up your fellow lawmaker. The law states it must be reported to the FBI. Okay, so let's get that out there first. The second is you must notify your co-conspirators of your intention to no longer participate. And as of this moment, every single one of you government officials are all co-conspirators, which means that you're going to have to stand in opposition of every single one of them. I had to do it. It sucks. Trust me. 9 years I've been fighting with all of my former colleagues about this, looking like a crazy person, but I knew I was right because I knew I wasn't going to be a member of this criminal conspiracy. So you're going to have to do the same thing I did. Now the good news is I'm already nine years along, right? I've already raised a lot, so it's not going to be too long that you're going to have to sit there. But you're going to have to tell every single other government employee that you are no longer going to work with them. You're not going to go in that courtroom. You're not going to prosecute. You're not going to arrest. You're not going to do those things that are unlawful any longer, because if you do, you are not mitigating your culpability in a criminal conspiracy, and you are still engaged in it, and you will still be added as a defendant in the action.
Now this is every state agent, like we're talking the janitor.
Anybody that's sworn oath to the Constitution of the United States of America must align themselves with the Constitution and no other laws. You have to understand the hierarchy of our laws. Constitution is what you swore fidelity with and to, not to judge-made rulings, not to the flawed decision the man came before you, not to the training program that they put you through, not to the state ordinances, statutes, customs, or nothing. The only thing that matters is what does the Constitution say, because that's the object of which your fidelity is bound.
Yeah, when I got thrown in jail, the only thing that came out of my mouth was, you got an oath. That's all I could think of. And
it doesn't matter what the state constitution says. What matters is what the Constitution of the United States of America says, because every single state constitution has placed itself into subjection to the Constitution of the United States. That's it. Okay? Yeah, all that. Here, Jess. Okay. Thank you, Jesse James, brother. Thank you. Keep your chin up, brother. God bless.
Where's he at?
He's in Michigan. Go ahead and stop. I'm going to grab his lights real quick.
Michigan. Oh, yeah, I guess I'm on. Hi, guys. I love it. So, no,
So
we're happy. We're happy to have him here.
Yes, we're happy to have
I'm learning a lot.
Tim and Jessica. I was out in DC with them back in June and with some other friends from the Warrior Project, and we were able to spend some time.
Yeah, hey,
after
Warrior
with
Project.
stuff.
Yeah, tell them about the
You
Warrior
should
Project.
you should come check us
Tell them
out.
about what you do on the Warrior Project.
Oh, the Warrior Project. So, Dave Weigel, he's a fiduciary in New York City, and he started the family stand-up.
Speak up.
Speak up.
Speak up. Like stand up. He started the Family Court Fraud Warrior Project, and I'm a moderator on the group, and I joined, my husband had went down to New York City.
I had to meet this guy, Dave, and he's a hell of a guy. I love you. I love you, Dave. Know you're watching, bud.
And so yeah, and I started doing some volunteer work and ended up, becoming a moderator for the project. And yesterday, me, Tanawah, Jessica, Dave, we went down to where were we? Stratford, I think. Stanford. And we actually, there is a mother who lost her life because of family court, and so we were down there to do a celebration of life, and it was great to have Tanawah and Jess and Dave able to come up from New York.
Up higher,
Higher,
yell,
loud enough.
project your voice.
But also explain what the family court warrior fraud is.
So Family Court
Yeah.
Fraud Warrior, so what we're requesting, anyone that is currently or even in the past been in a family court case and that there is corruption within your case, to come onto our
Fine.
page. There's a little homework to do beforehand, but head over to the featured content, watch some of the videos that Dave has posted.
It's
kind
not a
of
normal
on-
Facebook
It's
page, is
not
it?
a
What
normal
do we call it?
Facebook
What do we
page.
call it?
Well, it's a public ledger.
That's right, it's a public ledger, so
It's a public
everything
ledger.
that goes on there is gonna attach to something that's gonna go in like a blockchain, and you're gonna have, that's just gonna be evidence.
Yes. So what it is it's turn your camera around, record a 3 to 5 minute video of yourself. It's pretty much like, hi, my name is Amy, and I am a victim of name
Name them,
the court jurisdiction, the city and state,
What they
you know,
did to you.
what they did to you. Name the judges, name the lawyers, whoever committed any crime against you, and then just end the video by renaming and just saying, I'm a victim of this court system with the jurisdiction, and just say, I'm a victim and I demand an investigation. From
3
there,
minutes.
yeah, three to 5, but try to get it into 3. You're not there to tell your story. It's just,
we don't need to relive the PTSD that we're all going through. And
Yes.
once you get it out there and you tell people what they did to you, and it kind of lifts it off your shoulder.
yes,
And then, so our offense is not in the courtroom, is it, Amy?
it is not.
Where is it? Tell 'em.
It is in the media.
That's right.
It is in the media, yes. And so anyone that's listening, if you're an investigative journalist, you want to come on board,
Please.
reach out to me.
Attorneys,
Amy, it's amy.c@fraudwarrior.org. So any investigative journalists, we really want the major media to come on board because we need it. I'm sure Tanawah and Jessica feel the same way.
and after listening to them, like, we are so closely related in this whole damn thing that, it's done being separate groups now. It's time to be one group.
Yeah.
And really unite. And it's not just me. Father X is saying the same thing. Check him out on YouTube.
Robert Garza.
Robert Garza is
Garza.
saying the same thing. Like, we got to take this dragon that we're got. I got the wing. Well, we got the head because we're the.
Stands with Meg.
Yep.
She's also she actually can make you laugh if you're feeling down. Some of her videos have great comedy to them.
Yeah, guys, we're going to be most effective when we come together in unity.
Amen.
Right?
Yeah.
The government wants to divert us. They want to divide us because that's where they win. Guys, if there's groups out there that are producing negativity and trying to divide, be really cautious about those groups because the division is not going to get us there. All right. We need to recognize the strength of each one of these individual groups. What they're doing with the Fraud Warrior Group is wonderful. It's important, right? And it's absolutely interrelated. We all have the same objective. And the moment that we realize that and start working together on the objective and not bashing each other or cutting each other down, but building each other up, we're going to see us rise up to the level that we need to be to overcome it. Now remember, what Dave is doing is extremely important, right? He's wanting to get the stories out. He's wanting to tell the narrative that has been denied. That's not what I'm doing. What I'm doing is I'm looking at the criminality of the judiciary and coming after them for their crimes. I'm just one piece of this overall thing. But we got to understand that every one of us is advancing to a certain outcome that we need to be building each other up
Well,
on.
even
right?
the parent that called in tonight, the one that's serving time in Alabama right now for posting things on her social media, she was trying to get the narrative out for her story, and look at what they did to her. They jailed her. They jailed her for almost 2 years. That's insane. So when you have numbers behind you to be able to tell your story, there's more people watching than just your friends.
Yeah.
And from experience, like even on our social media pages, our regular pages, we know a lot of friends, a lot of family members. We've had family pretty much cut us off because they think we're crazy. They think we're making this up. They think, and that's so not the truth. So if you're one of those people listening, just realize I have 2 other parents here in my house tonight, along with me and my husband, that have gone through this same thing. Our stories might not be exactly the same, but we're going through the same thing. And there's thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of more parents that don't have their children.
And remember, like some of these things are going to fall into place. Like what's going to happen when we do nullify and void these judgments, right? Well, what's going to happen? We're going to have systems and solutions in place to be able to decide what we're going to do with bringing these people back into society or restoring these relationships with these families. We're going to have those. Like what I'm doing is only a first step, you guys. We need the work from Stand With May. We need the work with Dave Weigel. We need the work with these other groups. We need these other groups to be preparing for what's going to come.
Well,
right?
even with like Robert Garza and other
Yes.
people who are changing law, like creating laws. Yes, they might not be following laws today. So you know, it's I kind of look at it too. Like right now, why are we creating laws if they don't even follow the ones we have? But in the long run, we're going to need these laws in place to make sure that this hopefully never happens again.
Absolutely.
We are able to turn it around.
And another thing is healthy discourse is good. If you don't agree with Tanawah, you don't agree with what we have that conversation. I got a friend that has that conversation, and he's slowly coming around, and he's coming to the right side. But that being said, we're all different personalities. That's what's so beautiful about this. So you're going to have some people that are uniquely qualified to go talk to people in this area of the world or whatever that do something that play baseball or that umpire baseball or whatever the case may be, and it's
And the really cool thing is, like, we just all sit here and we say, you know what, we thank God, because we would have never met Tanawah and Jessica. We would have never met Dave Weigel, who was on Wall Street. Like, we would have never met him, like, in real life. So, like, God uses these times of complete, like, sorrow and pain, and he brings good out of all of it.
Nobody's listened to me. No, it felt like nobody's listened to our story. And the first night, the other night, we were at my father and mother-in-law's house, and people actually sat and heard us for the first time ever.
Yeah.
So something's changing. People hearts are softening, or they're knowing that there's something wrong, because when you go in and you tell people that, I had a pistol permit and an inmate card, like that's unique, that's weird, it's different, it's something to talk about, and they go, what? Huh? How is that possible?
And how do you end up a criminal at the age of
I started at 46, at 48.
At 48 years old. Like one day you're just gonna wake up at 48 years old and be like, you know what? I think I'm gonna go start, just
Life is crime.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, remember that as a child is a product of the environment that they're raised in. So if I produce an abusive environment because I'm an abusive man, then my child is going to become an abusive person, because that's what he's following. He's following me in the direction I give him. And a man is no different. We are a product of the environment that we're in.
Yep.
So as long as our leaders are criminals leading us in the direction of criminality, then we can understand that they are producing an environment of crime, which is going to produce a society of criminals. We are following our leaders. That's why I say crime must be fought from the top down. You can't start from the bottom and work your way up, because before the people can be led in a direction of lawfulness, we have to start with good leaders who are obeying the law and acting lawfully. So that's why the whole tour and everything I'm doing, We Shall Be Free tour, is fighting crime from the top down. We want to make sure that we got leaders that are going to lead us in a lawful direction out of love, faith, and obedience to the law, respect for the people and the will of the people and the laws that they establish that create the limitations of their powers. And until we have lawful leaders that are leading us in a lawful direction, nothing that they do is going to produce a lawful outcome. Because again, if government is unlawful, what they produce is going to be unlawful. Right will always produce right, but wrong will always produce wrong. You can never have a right outcome derived from a wrong decision. And that's why I say that a lot of people,
You got a question, City
Okay.
Council.
Oh, how to
You want
help.
to finish your thought? You wanna bring
yeah,
it
yeah. So my point here is that we've got to fight this from the top down. That's why we're going to the Supreme Court of the United States. Supreme Court, you made the decision. Whether it was you 9 individuals or not, it was your institution, and you are acting criminally because you're relying upon the decision of a slave owner.
That's right.
And 9 slave owners. Because of the first 28 Supreme Court justices that served on our Supreme Court, 22 of them owned their own slaves, and then we wonder why we have slavery embedded into the American justice system. We wonder why we take our own people and we force them into involuntary servitude in a for-profit business for the direct benefit of the state, and we even call it slavery because the 13th Amendment doesn't say you can't have slavery. It says slavery can exist as a punishment for a crime. Neither slavery nor involuntary servitude shall exist except as punishment for a crime. The moment you say except, it means that you can't have slavery. But we call slavery justice here in America. So all that we did was we took something and we retitled it as something different. We changed it from a private institution to a public institution. And then we said the slave owner is now the state. And then we made the state immune. So that you can't sue the slave owner for your freedom. This is the reality of the system that we're dealing with here. A prisoner is a slave and a slave is a prisoner. They mean the same thing, synonymous, yeah.
Okay, so we have a caller and she has a question about how to get involved.
Okay.
Jennifer?
Hey, Jennifer.
Hi, Tanawah.
Tell her to speak up. So
First
everybody
and
can hear you.
foremost, God bless you.
Thank you. Blessings to you.
Thank you. My question is really, how do I get started? I'm in a chapter of my life where I have been severely affected by our government, and now I have a full understanding of a lot of behind the scenes. And my goal in the next couple of years is to go back to school. And I would like to know what would be my best direction to learn how to participate, possibly litigate, so that I could be more boots on the ground for possibly the smaller portion to be in the communities and help people. My situation was property tax. My house was paid for. And during COVID, they attacked me hard. And so I see a lot of elderly, I see a lot of low income, and that would be something that I would, have a desire to go into these smaller communities and help people with that. But also on the bigger front, such as yourselves, where would I get started? Like what courses, what classes do you suggest that would help me to move into the direction that you guys are in?
History.
Yeah, so I got a master's degree in substantive law and from the George Washington University. And guys, I graduated with a 3.98 GPA with distinction on the South Lawn of the White House, Washington, D.C. But I'll tell you what, I didn't know the law until I started reading the law. And if you guys are spiritual, not spiritual, I don't care. But I learned a lot from the Bible. I learned a lot from it. And not only from just the Bible, but then when I started reading the Constitution and started really reading it, everything I know came from that. I mean, if you want to know the law, then don't go to a man to learn the law. Go to the law to learn the law. Just like the Bible says. There's one teacher, one instructor. The teacher teaches you what you need to know. You go to the Bible and you learn what you need to learn. It has the power to teach you what you need to know. Because you can't go to a church and say, hey, teach me about God, because that man can only teach you what man teaches, right? If you want to know God, you go to God to learn from God. He'll teach you what you need to know. Same thing with the law. If you want to know the law, you go to the law and you read it. That's why traditionally, like Abraham Lincoln, you guys, he was a federal circuit attorney, right? I mean, he rode the circuit. He didn't go to law school, right? He only had a third grade education, and then he read the law. He read the law for 2 years, and once he read the law, that's how he became practicing in the law. You don't have to go to law school to know the law, because all law school is going to teach you is what that man wants you to know, right? You go to the law and you read the law. That's why traditionally attorneys, that's how they became an attorney, was you read the law.
What about influencing somebody? Because that seems like it's, we were kind of talking about that today, like opening up listening. How do we open up the listening of people to get them to
realize what issue this is?
That's...
Yeah, so this is the thing, right? So on the indictment issue, and I'm gonna bring that up once again, because this is the easiest one. It's the easiest one across the board because it's written right in the Constitution. Says you got to have an indictment by a grand jury before arresting someone, holding them over for these crimes, and yet the states don't do it. That is one that anybody can understand. So I'm gonna go with it. So if the Constitution requires that, right, then what is happening is that a police officer who works for the mayor, right, he's going out and he's relying upon what he's been taught, that he can arrest someone on information.
Yep.
He can write a bill of complaint, an affidavit of complaint for probable cause, and he can give that to a judge and ask the judge to hold this person over for this felony, right? Because that's what he was taught. Because that's what the state law says he can do. But he doesn't understand that he can't rely upon state law to violate someone's constitutional rights, because if he does, he commits a crime. Title 18, subsection 2.2. So first off, all of these public officials, you better know the Constitution, because that's what you promised to do. And if you don't fulfill what you promised to do, you have already implicitly invited punishment in the form of perjury should you fail to fulfill your promise. So if you're required to have an indictment by a grand jury and you bring an affidavit instead to a judge, right, it doesn't matter why you did it. It doesn't matter who told you that you could do it, because ignorance of law is no reason for having violated the law. So if the Constitution requires you to do something, and you promise to do it, and then you don't do it, you are automatically guilty of a per se crime of perjury, right? And perjury, by the way, is it's punishable by 5 years imprisonment, right? It's a serious offense, and that's each time you do it. Each time, 5 years, and it's also a violation of public trust, meaning you can't be trusted by the public to fulfill your job. So the moment you commit perjury, public officials, you can't be a public official anymore, because it's a violation of public trust. So the thing is that when a police officer does what they've been told to do, because that's just what they were trained to do, doesn't matter why they do it. If they do it, they've committed a crime. And by that crime, remember, everything that derives from a criminal act is criminal. Nothing that you do, if you commit a crime in the pursuance of an outcome, that outcome is always going to be the product of a crime, which means it can never be valid. So when that police officer relies upon an inferior state statute to deprive a person of a right that they're guaranteed by the Constitution of the United States, and then brings the incorrect charging instrument to a judicial officer of the state and says, "Judge, I'd like you to hold this person over," that judge has a duty and a responsibility to make sure that the power that they exercise is consistent with their authority. If that judge chooses to rely upon and exercise his power, relying upon a police officer who abused their power by relying upon an inferior state statute to deprive a person of a right they're guaranteed by the Constitution, that judge is also depriving of rights under color of law, but now he's established a conspiracy to deprive of rights by and between himself and that police officer. Wow. There's no denying that this is exactly what happens. So the moment that a state creates a law that directs their people or their agents to disobey the Constitution, that is an unconstitutional law, is it not?
Yeah.
Article 1, Section 10 of the Constitution says, "No state shall create any law that shall impair the obligation of contracts." When you make a promise, when you take an oath, you have created a contract, a verbal contract with the people that you will produce a future outcome. And if you fail to fulfill that future outcome because the state has created a law that's directing you to impair your obligations to that contract, that law is in violation of Article 1, Section 10. No state can create a law that shall impair the obligation of contracts. So any law that directs the agents to disobey the Constitution and to not fulfill the obligations that they have based upon the promise that they made under oath or affirmation, that is a violation of Article 1, Section 10. It is also a violation of the 14th Amendment, because no state shall create or enforce any law that shall abridge the privileges and immunities of United States citizens. So, again, going back to what is the privileges and immunities of United States citizens? Well, 2019, unanimous decision, Timms versus Indiana. The Supreme Court of the United States says the privileges and immunities of United States citizens are at a minimum those enumerated within the Bill of Rights, given their legal effect against interference by the states because of their codification in the Constitution's text. So the Supreme Court of the United States in a unanimous decision, 6 of the same justices that are on the court right now today said in 2019 that at a minimum, every single person, every single United States citizen is guaranteed what is written in the Bill of Rights. So the question that we're going to have is, okay, grand jury is clearly right there. Therefore, no state can create or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges and immunities of United States citizens. What are they going to say now? The 14th Amendment says that if a state creates a law that abridges, which means reduce, diminish, or take away any of the privileges and immunities of United States citizens, that is a violation of the 14th Amendment. Grand jury is clearly enumerated in the Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments. Therefore, it is at a minimum what every single United States citizen is guaranteed. Period. So there's no denying these two violations. Violation of Article 1, Section 10 through the 14th Amendment. These states, every one of their laws, are all unconstitutional. It doesn't matter why the state enacted a law that permits their prosecuting attorneys to disobey the Constitution. It is simply a matter of that they did. Because the Constitution requires the indictment, and they didn't do it. And that's a huge deal. Because today, there's more than 700,000 people currently in prison right here in America right now that never received an indictment by a grand jury, despite the fact that that is at a minimum what is guaranteed to every single United States citizen, regardless of where they choose to reside within the jurisdiction of the United States. This is the biggest civil rights case in American history. So we have a conspiracy by and between the judicial branch and the executive branch. Because remember, prosecutors are executive, law enforcement is executive. Those are bureaus and agencies, right? Falls under the authority of the executive branch, so the mayor or the whatever. So we have a conspiracy that exists by and between the executive and the judicial. Now, to answer your question, I know that was a very roundabout way.
I love it. Keep
Okay,
going.
so we have a third branch of government, you guys. It's called the legislative branch. Okay, 3 branch of government: judicial, executive, legislative. The challenge that we've had up until now is I couldn't get the legislative to get involved in this because they know it's true. They all, in fact, when I sat down with Senator Mark Wayne from Oklahoma, and I'm like, hey, your state has created a law that's abridging the fundamental rights of people because they don't have the indictment by grand jury. He said, oh, that's a state issue. We don't get involved. We abstain, right? And so we had a United States senior senator say, oh, we're not going to do anything about this because it's too big of a deal. This is too big of a deal, and I'm not a part of the criminal conspiracy, therefore I don't even want to get involved in it because that's too big of a deal. So we had to find a way to get the third branch of government to have some skin in the game. We had to get them involved because they didn't want it. They didn't want to be a part of it because they're like, wait, this is the judicial and the executive. We don't want to get involved in this because this is a can of worms we don't want to open up. So they were saying we abstain. We're not going to get involved.
Aren't those people we're supposed to go to talk to when we got problems?
So yes, yeah. So we had to find a way to bring the legislative branch in, and we decided to use the emolument violation as the way to do it. Because the truth is that who is really responsible for this situation? Well, let's break it down real quick. Okay, prosecuting attorney is bringing the incorrect charge and instrument. Police officers bringing the incorrect charge and instrument. They must be responsible for it, right? It's the executive branch. They're the ones that's choosing the incorrect charge and instrument. So they must be to blame for it. But hang on. It's the judicial branch, right? Maybe they're to blame because the Constitution says no person shall be held to answer. And who makes the decision to hold someone over? Well, that's the judiciary. Okay, so maybe the judiciary is the one to blame for all of this, right? Maybe it's not the executive branch. Maybe the executive branch can choose the incorrect charge and instrument, but it's the judge that has to make sure that the indictment is there. Maybe they're the ones to blame. But you know what? Maybe it's the legislative branch, because if they were paying these people to do their work, there wouldn't be any crime, because these people wouldn't do anything if they were paid to do it. So maybe it's the legislative branch that's really the one responsible for all of this, right? Now we got all 3 branches pitted against each other. Sun Tzu said in the book The Art of War that the first step to reaching victory is to break up the alliances and pit them against each other. Who's going to take the blame for this? Is it going to be the executive branch for bringing the incorrect charge and instrument? Is it going to be the judicial branch for holding people over without having the proper charge and instrument in place? Or is it going to be the legislative branch for paying all these people to commit the crimes they're committing? Which branch is going to be responsible? Which branch is going to step up and provide the oversight to fix this problem? Or are all 3 of them going to go down? You see, the legislative branch, they weren't involved in this. They were standing back and saying, we don't want to be a part of this because we're not a part of the criminal conspiracy. But you know what, legislative branch? You paid people to do their work. Therefore, right, nobody would be committing any crimes, public officials, because they wouldn't do anything without you paying them to do it. Therefore, legislative branch, maybe you're the ones that are responsible. Maybe you're the ones to blame in all of this, right? So the question is which branch is going to step up and provide the oversight necessary to fix this problem so that they aren't the ones to blame? Because I can say that all three of the branches, any one of them could take the pulp of this because all three of them are responsible for it. Right, absolutely.
But it's got to be people.
So in order to get the legislative branch to have skin in the game, in order to get the skin in the game, we said, you know what, Jess, let's go ahead and let's start doing this. So that's why Jess and I, we started leading, right, and started stepping out and saying, okay, let's start going to the city councils, because the city councils pay the police to do their job. And if the police are going out there and performing arrests unconstitutionally because they're relying upon the Imperial State statute, then you know what, Mayor, you know what, city council members, you're paying for those crimes to be committed. So that's why we're reading the script, and we're saying that an emolument violation is when you pay someone to break the law. So therefore, city council, if you continue to pay your police despite being made aware of this situation, then guess what? That is switching from negligence to willful criminal conduct now. So they can either, one, stop paying for the crimes to be committed, or two, they can direct them to act in a lawful constitutional manner. And until they do, they won't be paid to do their work anymore, because if you pay someone to commit a crime, you are guilty of that same crime. That's the way criminal conspiracy works. So there's the city council, you guys. If your city council, if your police are committing crimes, you go into your city council and you inform that city council of those crimes, and you tell them that if you pay these people to do their work anymore, that you are responsible for it, right? And every one of you have the power to do that. Every single city council meeting has a public hearing period. That means you're putting it on the record. Go in there and inform that city council that you are no longer going to permit them to commit these crimes, right? Because they're responsible for paying it. And you're going to put the burden onto them now. Do you want to continue to pay for these crimes? And if so, we know what you are, right? You've already shown what you are. Or two, you can fix this problem, right? Now that's city council. Why are we going to county commissioners? Because county commissioners pay for sheriff's budget and the jail budget and the courtroom budget, right? County courtrooms. So if the sheriff is going out and executing a warrant because the judge signed a warrant because they relied upon the prosecutor who abused their power by relying upon an Imperial State statute to deprive a person of right they're guaranteed by the Constitution, that means that sheriff is executing an unconstitutional warrant, because it derives from the unconstitutional act when the judge decided to abuse their power and deprive a person right under color of law. Therefore, county commissioner, you're paying for that sheriff to perform that unconstitutional arrest, that execute that unconstitutional warrant. And then that sheriff is taking someone who they have now kidnapped and putting them into a jail, a county jail, and you're now housing them unconstitutionally and illegally against their will. County commissioner, you're paying for that to happen. And then when they take them into a courtroom and they bring them through the legal proceeding that is now unconstitutional because it derives from the unconstitutional arrest, county, you're paying for that courtroom to commit these unconstitutional acts. County commissioners, you are absolutely responsible for fixing this problem, or you are culpable in it, right? You guys all have the power to do this. Every one of you have the power to step up and redress grievances and do exactly what Jess and I are going around the country and doing, and we need your help to do it. I can't do this all by myself. We can't. We need your help, because there's lots of cities that need to be told about this. There's lots of counties that need to be told about this. And I'm going to tell you right now, this is the first time that I'm bringing this up, but this is all preparing for me to walk into the state houses next and inform them that you will no longer pay your judges or your prosecutors, because the state pays for them. You're no longer going to pay your judges or your prosecutors to commit these crimes. This is just the start. This is practice for us before we walk into state houses next month when they're back in session, and informing them that they will no longer pay those judges and prosecutors to commit these crimes.
And Tanawah, Jessica is training people, correct?
Yes, so every Thursday, Jess is doing a meeting. You guys are welcome to get on it. We would rather not have any of the prying eyes, the FBI, or any of those other assholes that are listening right now. We'd rather not have you on it. But
Please DM me. I want to participate.
Okay.
Participate.
so you have Jess's, well, you have her number right now. So every Thursday, guys, at 8:30 Eastern time, she's running a little training session, and so anyway, long story short, you guys can download the script that I wrote. The 2-page script, the same thing that Jess is saying in every one of these services. You can download that along with the 4-page notice that we're given to the city clerk, because the first step is we're going to tell them about it, but then we're going to give them paperwork to further tell them about it, right? So you can download the script and the notice from justicewithoutlimits.org. Justicewithoutlimits.org, right? And that's all you need. Now, one of the things is that the notice and everything, it has my name on it. But the reason why it has my name on it is because you guys you don't want the attention on you, right? You don't want this city council and county commissioner and everybody looking at you. You guys want them pointed back at me, because I'm prepared to argue this for you. I'm ready to advocate on your behalf at the Supreme Court of the United States. So what we're doing is we're bringing a whole bunch of attention onto me. You want this attention on me, right? Because I don't know anybody else that's prepared to argue this particular argument that is aware of all this stuff, that is prepared like God's prepared me. So you guys don't want the attention on you. You want that attention on me. And so that's why it does say Mr. Tanawah Downing is prepared to litigate this to the Supreme Court, because I am. I'm prepared to litigate this on your behalf, right? But we need to build up, and I need your help. So you guys are going out there, you're putting as much attention onto me so that court can't ignore what we have any longer, and so that I can go in and fight this battle on you and your family's behalf and bring victory back home. Once I get that victory, once I set that precedent, you will all be empowered at your local level to be able to do what you need to do with the precedent that I set. I will argue it on your behalf, and then I will empower you with the law through a judge-made ruling from the Supreme Court to be able to go back into your court and to address whatever they're doing to you because of the precedent we will put in place. It is all for one and one for all. Okay? You guys come together for me, and I promise you I will give you what you need back. All for one and one for all.
I appreciate you, Tanawah. I can't. I've been waiting for Jesus to arrive and to be in here.
Amen.
God bless you. Thank you,
I'm
son.
very thankful. So basically, I'm going to begin reading the laws.
I would. Well, so Constitution, because before you can start sorting through the case law, you have to know the foundational law. So everybody, you need the foundation first, right? Don't go to case law, because case law is not law, first off, right? It's judge-made rulings, but rulings that were made by slave owners is going to make decisions that's contrary to the laws that set free, right? So if the first 28 justices that served on the Supreme Court 22 of them were slave owners, and slave owners created rulings that they erroneously and unconstitutionally called law, those rulings are contrary to laws that set free. So if the Constitution got its way, all these judges would be out of a job, because the Constitution declared that all men are to be free. And yet slave owners have created the foundation of common law, case law, and said that's what determines the future outcome. So don't go and read case law. Let's start with the foundation. I know it's only 4 pages, but I guarantee you could spend 2 years studying the Constitution, because I did. That was all I did for the first 2 years. Once you know the foundation, then start building out from the foundation. Remember the hierarchy of law. Constitution first. Next is treaties. Next is statutes, but that would be federal statute, United States Code, and then it would be state constitutions, then it would be state statutes. Once you start with the foundation and you know the foundation, then you'll be able to identify, oh, well, this state provision is contrary to that, right? Because I know the foundation. So build out from the foundation, and then once you have the firm foundation, then you'll be able to identify conflicts, because there's lots of United States Code that is also in conflict, such as the 1925 Judicial Reform Act, which said that the Supreme Court of the United States is a court of discretion. Well, the court can't be a court of discretion if the Constitution created an obligation such as they did in Article 3. So you have to start with the foundation, and once you know it, then you can start building out from it, and then you'll be able to identify the conflicts. But if you start at the bottom with case law, you'll never be able to determine what is the truth and what's not the truth, because you won't know the truth because you didn't start with the foundation. Yeah.
And that's what I needed. I needed that structure, that start here, then go here, then go here. I've been doing this for about 4 to 5 years after, like I said, I've been entrapped with the system in my county. So that's where I need it, because everyone always wants you to read statutes and codes and, oh, they can't do this. But I started with the Constitution, and then I needed to know like where to branch out in order to move further into the warrior stage.
Yeah. Thank you so much. God bless you, sister. Thank you. God bless you.
Jennifer.
Have a great night.
Thank you.
Sorry.
So again, when we started with the
Well, here's what I was thinking when she was saying that. What I was thinking was judges with case law. Judges, their job is not to create law.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
That's not their job. That's the legislative branch's job.
Right.
Like, they're not supposed to be creating laws. It's exactly right. Case law cannot be law.
And this is what I'm fighting, guys, right? So remember, last year, June 28th of 2024, we got the Chevron ruling overturned, right? Chevron, it was overturned by SEC versus Starkowski case at the United States Supreme Court, June 28th. Now, what that case was all about was, it was 40 years ago, the Supreme Court came out and they said, if there's ambiguity in the law, if the law is not clear, right, then the executive branch, they can write policy and to clarify the law, right? So it was permitting attorney generals, it was permitting prosecutors to be able to say, oh, that law is not clear, it's ambiguous, therefore we're going to clarify it through administrative action or administrative policy, right? Executive orders, for instance, right? But the executive branch has no authority to legislate, because all legislative power is vested in Congress of the United States, consisting of a Senate and House of Representatives, Clause 1, Article 1. So when the executive branch believes that they have the ability to be able to amend the law through their policy and go out and enforce it as though it's law, well, the Supreme Court decided on June 20th of last year that no, you don't. There's a separation of powers issue there. Executive branch, if you're not clear on what the law requires or limits you to do, then you must go to the branch of government that has the authority to amend it and get clarification. Otherwise, what you've done is unconstitutional. That was what Chevron was all about, right? So if we want the Constitution back at its foundation, we had to have two things happen. One is executive branch, you don't get to legislate. You don't get to create law, because everything that you do must be within the parameters and limitations of what the people create, because all legislative power is vested in the people. We create law. Executive branch, you do not. So when we create a law and we provide parameters for you to operate within, you cannot operate outside of those parameters at all. Otherwise, what you're doing is unlawful. And that's what the Supreme Court decided. So the first thing we had to do was we had to remove all the bullshit that the executive branch created, all their orders and policy. That was Chevron. Started the process. I know we're not there yet, but that was the first step. The second step is we have a judicial branch that doesn't get to create law either. So all the bullshit that the judicial branch created that was supposed to have been judge-made rulings that they erroneously called case law, it's not law, because all legislative power is vested in Congress of the United States. So judicial branch, you had no constituted authority to legislate from the bench. You have no constituted authority to create law. Therefore, all your bullshit that you say is law is not law. All the rulings that you created that told the states they don't have to follow the Constitution is not law, because we, the people, did not delegate the authority for judges to legislate here in America. And if you don't like that judicial branch, if you think that it should be different, that's fine. Present your case to the people of the United States, but until you do that, what you're doing is treason, because you don't get to create law. We, the people, did not delegate the authority for judges to create law here in America. So all of your bullshit, all your law is all unconstitutional under the separation of powers. Once we remove all of the judicial rulings that was unconstitutionally and erroneously and illegally called law, once we remove it, then the Constitution is going to fall back into its place. Because the foundation today is executive orders and judge-made rulings, erroneously called law, case law. All of that has become the foundation. So we think, oh, what the president says is the law because the police go out and they arrest you regardless of whether you broke the law or not. Right? What they're doing is unlawful, right? Because they don't get to create the foundation. We think that judges make the law because here in America they go to the case law, but judges don't create law. So the foundation today is not the Constitution, not the will of the people, but a creation from two branches of government that has no authority to be able to govern us, right? Because we the people, we control our destiny. Because we the people give the government the power to govern through the consent of the governed. We create the law, and when they don't obey the law, or they act outside of the law, or they overstep their limitations and power, what they've done is unconstitutional. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to remove the judicial portion. This hasn't been addressed. Chevron removed the executive issue, right? It's not done yet, but the ruling is in place. Now we're working on the second part, which is judicial branch, you don't get to create law either. And once I prevail in what I'm doing, then the Constitution will fall back into place. And then these other groups that are working on these other things, these ones that are helping train you on how to file 1983s and stuff, I know you're not getting action yet on it, but what we're doing is we're clearing up this obstruction of justice so we can pave the way for these other groups to step up and do what they do, right? Already have everything in place, ready to go, so that when I am done with the work that I'm doing, with what God has brought me and assigned me to do, once we do that, then all these other groups are going to have the obstruction cleared up, and the work will already be paved. You guys will already be ready to go.
And another thing real quick is like, someone asked like, what can I do to help? What can I do to help? We need to get the word out there. Like, everyone that's watching on whatever platform you're watching on tonight, like, we know so many people we talk to and they're just like, oh yeah, okay. Like,
it's like,
we gotta get the word out there. We gotta let people know what's really going on, because people are living like I always say, like in their house with their white picket fence with their kids running around. If you don't think they'll come after your family, think again. Like, it
don't matter if you're girl or boy,
yeah,
man or woman, they're gonna get you, because that's the point. Because you're either on this side or you're
on the other side. And so we need so like if you're watching tonight, like share, get the discussion started with friends and family, and just be like, have you heard? Have you heard this is what's going on? Because our media is not telling us the truth. And that's why it's so important to have the investigative journalists and people out there that are actually telling the truth. Truth will prevail. God tells us that. Truth will prevail. If you're a believer, we're told to speak truth. We're compelled to speak truth. And, are you doing your job today? I know there's days where I have to ask myself that. Sometimes fear sets in, but, we got to keep on marching forward, and the truth has to keep coming out of our mouths, and, through our typing on our computers, on all our social medias, and, when we're with our friends and family. And, some people don't want to hear the subject, but this is so, like, it's great to talk about all the wonderful things that might be happening in life when you're with people and everybody's sharing, great excitement, but this could take it all away from everyone. So with that, we got to keep sharing and
resist. Like, if they try to impute these things upon you, I mean, what's the best thing we can do? We can resist. We can tell them what they're doing. We can say, Maureen, knock it off. It's hard because we're I guess, like, well, I mean, I was in the Marine Corps, so I'm used to following orders, and to stand in front of somebody
That's authority.
who's an authority figure, who is 4 feet above me in a robe, and telling me that I'm doing something wrong when I know that I'm not, and I know that it's a gut check, because I don't want to go to jail. I don't, but then again, I simply can't just fish over.
Well, you also took an oath.
I took an oath. That's right. Like, it is what it is, right? I don't want to be complicit in this, and man, it'd just be a lot. Well, you know what though? If we don't do this, like tyranny's afoot. We got 1 billion dead people in Europe. Just 2 generations ago?
Yeah.
Like, that's exactly where this is going. And so somebody told me something like, when you feel resentment, it's either tyranny is afoot, or you're being oppressed, or you just need to grow the hell up.
Yeah.
Like, those are like the 3 things. And so if you're feeling resentment at any of this stuff, it's like, well, which one is it?
Yeah, we talked about forgiveness earlier today, right? And I wouldn't change anything that happened to me, because I know where I'm at right now, and I'm pretty proud of myself. Like, I'm proud of the man that I become and the things that I'm doing. Then this is never. I mean, I would have never been out doing these things had it not been for the situation that I was put into. I'm not mad at my ex-wife for what she did, because she made me do what I was created to do. So, forgiveness comes with purpose. It's in knowing that there's a reason for your suffering that makes that suffering bearable, right? So if you know that you're doing something and becoming something, you know that you got a destination, then you also know that there's going to be good things that are going to happen, and there's going to be bad things that are going to happen. But everything must happen to reach that destination. I've known for years that I'm right on this issue. I've known, even when no one else believed me, I knew I was right? And so I knew the destination, I knew the outcome, I knew where I was heading, because I knew that I was right? I knew that the law was on my side.
Precisely.
So consider the butterfly effect. That something as simple as the flicker of a butterfly's wing in China can cause this cataclysmic chain of events that will ultimately lead to a tidal wave in Los Angeles, right? But in order for that to happen, right, the end to be produced, there has to be a whole bunch of stuff that will occur along the way. So a butterfly takes off from a tree in China, right? And something as simple as that can cause a cataclysmic chain of events that will lead to a tidal wave in California. This is the theory of the butterfly effect. But in order for the tidal wave to happen, there has to be all of these actions and reactions along the way. That butterfly has to disrupt the drop of water on the leaf of the tree when it takes off, and that drop of water must fall, and it causes a chain reaction of events, of actions and reactions. But if you take out any of the individual actions or any of the individual reactions, you don't have the intended outcome. So if you know the purpose, if you know the outcome, then you know that all of these things have to happen along the way. If you remove the pebble that rolls down the hill, right, the tidal wave doesn't happen. If you remove the truck that runs off the road and hits a light pole, you remove the outcome. So we know that there's going to have to be things that will happen. And that's why forgiveness comes with purpose. It's in knowing that there's a reason for your suffering that makes the suffering bearable. I can't say why someone has to, or why a child dies, and how that can produce a good outcome. But what I can say is that when you know that there's God, because God is purpose, right? Absent God, we have chaos.
That's right.
But when we know that there's a purpose, that comes from our knowledge of God. So forgiveness can only come from awareness of God himself. Because without God, everything is chaos. So the thing is that I don't have to be mad at anyone. The judge that didn't let me testify and denied me my right to be able to testify and defend myself and protect myself. If he hadn't have done that, I wouldn't be here right now doing the things I'm doing. I'm not mad at him for what he did. I'm upset with him for his failure to be a man and have honor and do the right thing and go in the right direction. But it's the same thing with all these other people. I'm not coming after a judge or a prosecutor or law enforcement. I'm trying to show them that you need to be honorable, right, and do the honorable thing, because the outcome is not going to change. We're going to reach this destination, and we're going to reach it together. And this destination is a just system with a whole bunch of people acting justly, or they're going to be the population of the prison, not the ones that they declared were guilty.
Amen.
This is an individual decision that every single person is going to have to make. But we all have to stop and say, you know what? I'm not going to hold these chains of unforgiveness on this person because of what they did to me, because the reality is that if they didn't do it, we wouldn't reach that destination.
And that's what we're fighting for.
Right.
Break those chains, right? Like that's the point. It's not...
So the moment that you realize that if this person hadn't have done these things to you, we would have a different outcome. God has promised a good outcome. He's promised us that there won't be any more tears. He's promised us this outcome. And if we trust the God, and if we believe in God, then we can know that the outcome's going to come with good things and bad things, but we don't have to be mad about the things that happen to us. We can understand that thing had to happen, because if it wouldn't have, then we wouldn't have the outcome that we're seeking. It's that simple. So one of the things that we have to do, remember, I'm trying to reach a jubilee, right? Whether you believe in God or not, I'm trying to reach a jubilee. And a jubilee, according to the book of Leviticus, it has two things. Two things have to happen for a jubilee to occur. One, you must release all the slaves, right? And a prisoner is a slave, and a slave is a prisoner. So all I'm saying is, first off, let's release the slaves, because that's what the Bible says must happen. You must release all slaves, because God didn't create anyone to be abused and trodden upon by his fellow man. So the first thing that has to happen is we have to release all slaves. It's the first thing. The second thing is all debt must be forgiven, right? You must forgive all debt. Those are the two things that that Leviticus says requires a jubilee, and those just happen to be the two things that I'm requesting, because we don't live in a system that is based upon just and equal principles. We live in a system that is economic based, because if you choose to violate the law, you incur a debt that is owed to society, to which you are charged and called to account so you can pay the debt. Those are all accounting terms, and accounting has to do with economics, not morality, right? So the justice system is not a system that's based upon morality, it's a system that's based upon economics. Because if you owe a debt to society, then you have to sell yourself into slavery to settle the debt. Thus, it's a criminal enslavement system, not a criminal morality, or not a public morality system. Mm-hmm. So if we want to have a jubilee, first off, we have to release the slaves. Second off, we have to forgive all public debt. Those are the two things we're asking for. And if we do that, then we will experience something that no nation has ever experienced, ever, in the history of the world. We have the opportunity to do that. But in order to do that, we all have to decide what it is that we believe in. Do we believe in a system that is acting unlawfully? Do we want to continue to follow criminals in the direction that criminals are leading us? Or do we want to go a different direction?
Different direction.
Do we want to follow the one thing that made America America? Do we want to follow the one law that has never been followed in the history of our nation? Do we want to follow that and go in a new direction than the direction that our country was headed in? Because you guys know that I'm a human lie detector. That's what I was trained to do in intelligence and homeland security. I identify liars. And to determine if a person is lying, you look at their words and their actions. Are their words consistent with their actions? And if they are, then they're not lying to you. But if a person says that that he's honorable, right? And he portrays himself as honorable, but yet he goes out and breaks the law, that is not an honorable person. His words and actions don't align. He's lying to you. So when a judge says that they're honorable, and yet according to Justice Hugo Black from 1960, honorable men honor the law, when a judge doesn't honor the law by their behavior, it means that they're lying to you. They're liars, committing perjury, right? We know that. So words and actions must align. And the reason why I bring this up is because our founders and forefathers who created our system of government, they had some amazing words that they spoke to the people. And they inspired millions of people to step up with pitchforks against the most powerful military known to mankind, right? And to stand up for the equality of all men, because George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, Alexander Hamilton all said, we believe that all men are equal. And the laws must apply equally to all men, right? And we'll use men interchangeably because it's all persons, right? We're not going to allow any sort of, word or issue, but nonetheless. So my question is that George Washington said that he believed that all men were equal. And yet when it came right down to it, he didn't make all men equal. He didn't do what God needed him to do to create a criminal justice system that's built upon just and equal application of the law. Instead, he created a criminal enslavement system because Mr. Washington refused to give up his property and make all men equal. So he didn't create a criminal justice system. He wasn't being truthful with the people in the words that he was saying, because his actions showed that he did not believe that all men were equal. But the problem that I have is that, again, most people would say, yeah, but he didn't see blacks as people. And I will not subscribe to that. I will not permit such a statement to be made, because he did see all men as, he did see them as people, because when he died, in his will, he released them and allowed his slaves to be free. So if he only saw his slaves as property, then he would have passed it down to his grandchild as the rest of his property. He did see them as people because he released them and set them free in his will. So he only kept them as his property as long as it was profitable to him. And it wasn't just him. So did Thomas Jefferson. So did James Madison. They all released their slaves in their will, which means that they did see them as equal. So my point here is that we don't have a criminal justice system because it's not built upon the just principles of all men being equal, egalitarianism. Instead, we have a criminal enslavement system because the lies that we were told from people that were not being honest is based upon the enslavement of people. And we can see that from terms, right? The Fugitive Slave Act. A fugitive is a slave, and a slave is a fugitive. Those two terms are synonymous with one another, right? A fugitive is a slave is a fugitive. In fact, when you read the Constitution in Article 4, where it says that a fugitive flees from one state to another, it was not referring to a criminal, it was referring to a slave. Because that's what it was talking about. A fugitive fleeing from one state to another must be returned to that state. So a fugitive is a slave, and a slave is a fugitive. Now fast forward to the 13th Amendment. This is the amendment that was adopted and ratified by the people in order to abolish slavery after over 600,000 people died in a war fighting in the battle for equality, the Civil War. And yet that does not abolish slavery, because the Constitution doesn't say you can't have slavery. It doesn't say that. What it says is it says neither slavery nor involuntary servitude shall exist except as a punishment for crime. Which means that you can be enslaved and forced involuntary servitude if you are deemed a criminal. Therefore, a criminal is a slave, and a slave is a criminal. Now we understand what it is they're talking about. When the founders wrote the Constitution, a prisoner is a slave, right? A fugitive is a slave, and those terms were interchangeable to our founders. And then today, we wonder why we have for-profit businesses that are established by the state, that the state employs workers to come into those businesses to be forced into involuntary servitude so that the state can directly benefit from the labor of those people placed in that involuntary servitude. Remember, I have people that I advocate for all through the state of Florida. 140,000 prisoners in the state of Florida, right? Those 140,000 prisoners are forced into involuntary servitude to make the chipset for General Dynamics fighter jets, and they don't get paid 1 cent to do that. State gets paid through the contract, but not the prisoner. That's not justice, that's slavery. The state of Florida gets paid by Northrop Grumman for the prisoners to come in and answer the help desk phones for their for-profit private defense contracting business. Prisoners don't get paid a cent to do that. State does, but not the prisoners. We have people we advocate for in the state of Georgia where the female prison sews the tags on Victoria's Secret underwear. The state of Georgia gets paid for that labor. Prisoners don't get paid 1 cent. Not 1 cent do they get paid to do that. We have people we're advocating for in Texas who is making hamburgers for McDonald's. Prisoners don't get paid a cent. State does, but not prisoners. That's not justice. That's slavery. My advocate for the state, or my applicant for the state of Louisiana, is building $100 million yachts for billionaires in the state of Louisiana. And he doesn't get paid 1 cent to do that. Not 1 cent. The state of Louisiana does, but not him. We have more than 900 prisoners in the state of Texas that go out every single day and fight fires to save millionaires and billionaires' homes, right? Who come back to a prison cell at night to eat crap for food, and they get paid $5 a day to do that. $5 a day. State of Texas or state of California gets paid for all the labor, but the prisoner only gets paid $5, and they call it gratuity. That is a job where that person, if they were in the commercial outside of prison, they'd be paid $500, $600 a day. Paid $5 a day. That's how much the prisoners are paid. That's not justice. That's slavery. So what we did was we took something and we retitled it something different. And we changed it from a private institution to a public institution. And now the slave owner is the state of Louisiana, the state of Wyoming, the state of Texas, the state of Washington, the state of Pennsylvania. The state is the slave owner because the state has established for-profit businesses that they employ the prisoners to labor in those businesses, and all they have to do to put them there is call them a criminal. That's it. So we have a system today where the state decides what is or is not criminal behavior, where the state investigates whether or not you've committed criminal behavior, the state that accuses you as to whether or not you've committed criminal behavior, the state that judges you as to whether or not you were a criminal, and then the state that profits off of your involuntary servitude in the for-profit business once the state has deemed you a criminal. Where is the fair and neutral decision maker in this process? Where is it? It's gone. It doesn't exist. Go ahead. I need to figure out.
Yeah, you lost that one.
I thought I...
Oh, did it come off?
Yep. Well, how do you follow that up?
I have heard about the Victoria's Secret and the McDonald's, and I don't know what Connecticut does if they do any of that.
I mean, they all do it. So the government permits them to do this, and allows for the states to establish these contracts with businesses, Victoria's Secret and all the rest. But even now today, you have one step further where you have for-profit businesses that build prisons. Right?
Run them.
Build prison and run them. You have Corrections Corporation of America, Geo Group, CCNA. Are
there any private federal prisons?
Yeah, there's lots of them. Yeah.
Wow.
Oh yeah. So and this isn't a blue or a red issue, but I will say that that under the Obama administration, there was an executive order to begin shutting down the private prisons with the Geo Group and CoreCivic, right? But when Trump came back into office, and guys, I'm not bad-mouthing Trump, but I am saying that the first day he was in office, he expanded the private prison contract and removed that executive order that was supposed to start shutting down the private prisons. So Mr. Trump, on his first day, he did sign an executive order that expanded the private prison contract to allow for the federal government to contract even more with Core Civic and CCNA.
Hey, Trump, let our people go, man.
And-
That's all you gotta do. Just
yeah.
let them go.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, really.
Well, I'm sure there's some payoffs there too.
Well,
That's the-
you always follow.
follow
I mean,
the
that's
money.
what that's what everybody says. Follow the money, and
Yes, this is my only account on TikTok. If you're being contacted by anybody else, it is a fake account, and they're stealing and scamming you. So this is my only account, guys. Don't get scammed by anybody else claiming to be me or claiming to be Jessica. No one will contact you and ask you for money, so please don't donate to them.
that happens quite a bit, huh?
These scammers have gotten. They get way more money than I get, like way more. We don't get hundreds of dollars, and yet this guy, whoever this scumbag is.
I wonder if it's the government.
So we've talked about that. It certainly could be, but we don't know as of quite yet.
Wouldn't be surprised.
You know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm gonna start this one back up because this was Facebook and I had good. 1 second, guys. We're almost there.
Yep. You
We're
keep talking if you
paused.
want. What do you want to talk about?
What do I want to
Yeah.
talk about?
TROs or minimus orders?
No. Really don't want to talk about those.
What,
Well, I mean,
So what is a minimum? Like, what is a minimum? There we go. Like, what is like? So I don't know much about it. All I know is the guy goes, put a medical on the minimus, and then I get handcuffs put on me, right? So I'm like, what the heck's a minimus? So I'm looking up what a minimus is, and so and then somebody also told me that. So I walked in for that contempt hearing, right? And those marshals there could not have gone in. If I would have walked out of the courtroom into the parking lot, they couldn't go there and get me and bring me back in. They don't have that right.
well, they don't. They might not have that authority, but it doesn't mean that they don't have the power to do whatever they're going to do.
See,
and that's what we're realizing.
And that's what
through
we're
all of
realizing,
this.
right? So, like, I guess that's a good question. So, what do we, when we're faced with this, like, is it, what's the right thing? What's the right thing to do when they're throwing the book at you, you know? And you're like, wait a second, this isn't supposed to be this way. And I'm coming to see this, and I'm like, you know, I walk in, and I'm like, why is this happening?
Well, I
You know?
mean, before we left for vacation, they came to our house trying to arrest you, and they were trying to bust down our door without a warrant.
But
And the words
but
that
they didn't cross that line, though.
well, they didn't, but were they going to? I don't know.
I don't know.
I mean, do we know?
I mean, I
They
don't.
broke our door.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's like, and they didn't have, they had no warrant, they had no authority, and they had, and
And they did it on affidavit.
they're
And they did it on affidavit.
no, they didn't even do it on affidavit.
Yes. So
They didn't have a
my
judge's
daughter.
signature.
No, my daughter made a statement on the form of an affidavit. So they came on information, like you were saying.
Information.
That's the
only.
information.
Yep.
What whoever says the information, they come to the house, and in a way though, it's like if the allegement was true, I'm kind of okay with them coming and kicking my ass. It wasn't true, so it's like I get that because that would make me. I wouldn't. I said this a few times. I don't like that guy that they make me out to be. Also, but that's not a grand jury, so why are we doing anything? And I mean that definitely.
Well, and they call it civil, right? Well, no,
that
that
was
would
been
see,
criminal.
That,
That was criminal. They were coming after.
But see, they were trying
It was
to.
risk of injury, so that's how they got the federal. Well, not federal.
federal.
The what he said before. That's how it was. It was going to be a felony, but it was also going to be a.
Infamous crime.
That's what it was.
Well, how was it a felony though when a police officer?
So it was more than how many years in prison is the.
More than 1 year imprisonment in penitentiary is what an infamous crime is. Yeah.
I need him.
And
So
Tanawah
infamous.
speed
So
dial.
it was infamous crime, and then they, of course, you're gonna throw in that little left hook of the breach of peace because that'll catch out everything.
That's in case the other one doesn't hold, right?
Just something more to throw in. And then they told me I was getting more charges because, like, as I was sitting there closing the door on them, and I'm like, this is my house. How can I get more charges? What are they going to risk injury of a child? My child was here, and man, that was such an experience. I don't want to do it again. I don't like armed men coming to my house and then armed men coming to the airport, all on the guise of a civil order. There's just so much wrong with it, and it's unsettling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where are we at? We're at 11 o'clock, huh?
Oh my
Are
gosh.
we already?
Really?
Yeah, almost 11 o'clock yet. So it's been 3 hours, guys.
Yeah. Wow.
3 hours.
Wow.
I thought it was like 9.
Yeah. So,
We have church in the morning.
Yeah.
So, maritime law.
Maritime.
Let me go ahead and let me go ahead and hit admiralty law, and maybe we'll end it here. And Facebook, you got a weird angle right there, but all right. So this goes back to our founders, right? In our it doesn't sit right.
It's the gimbal.
Yeah, the gimbal is really retarded.
Okay. Oh, I see how you do it. Okay. It does got a weird angle. I shouldn't have touched it.
It's all right. It's all right. Here. Actually, we could switch.
You know what?
out-
I'm gonna hold it. I'll just hold it.
Well, we can put it right here. We just put it right here.
Perfect.
As long as the.
Want me to get some ice cream while you're talking about this?
John wants his ice cream.
It's 11 o'clock. There we go. Is that no way?
That's a little bit.
So maritime law. So I've heard this before, that they're going to take us out in ships. They're going to treat us like
Well,
we're.
they take us out in ships in the courtroom,
Yeah,
right?
I don't. I'm not going to go into quite that level.
Yeah.
But so the Constitution identifies two different jurisdictions, right? There's common law jurisdiction and there's admiralty jurisdiction. Okay, there's two different jurisdictions that's available. Now, common law jurisdiction would be Constitution, right? That would be
Right.
Constitution based. Admiralty jurisdiction is contract law, right? It's contract law. That's why bankruptcy is done in federal court, is because bankruptcy falls under admiralty jurisdiction, and the federal court has jurisdiction over admiralty jurisdiction, referred to Article 3. But anyway, the history behind it is this: is that it goes back to the stamp tax in 1628. All right, so stamp tax. So if you're not familiar with it, the stamp tax was extremely unpopular amongst the colonists, right? We hated it because it was taxation without representation. So we didn't have representation in the parliament in Great Britain, so we couldn't say, no, we don't want to be taxed. So we were being taxed without representation. And so it was extremely unpopular. But if you violated the stamp tax, then you could be thrown into prison, right? And remember here, prison is a fairly new concept. The first prison didn't start until the mid 1700s. There was no prison before that. So right around the time that our country was being established was when the whole prison concept started. It didn't exist before that, right? It wasn't something that we did. So prison's relatively new, but they could throw you into jail, could throw you in prison if you violated the stamp tax. But it was extremely unpopular. It's what led to the Boston Tea Party, right? When they went out and they challenged the king for the stamp tax. It's also what led to the Revolutionary War. We declared our independence against taxation without representation.
That sounds like a child support.
Yeah, it is. He's absolutely right? Because once again, going back to the very beginning, when I said earlier that the only branch of government that can create a tax against the people is the people. The people, we wrote in the separation of powers, we wrote that the only branch of government that can tax the people is the legislative branch. Therefore, when an agency such as Health and Human Services decides that you have to pay child support, that's unconstitutional, you guys, because the tax must come from the legislative branch. And again, in the courtroom, who represents the legislative branch? The jury.
And they're not even nice either. They're just rude.
Right. So Health and Human Services is an agency that works for the executive branch. So when the judge makes a determination that you have to pay child support, that would be the judicial branch taxing the people, right? When an officer pulls you over, right, and writes you a ticket for $200, that is the executive branch creating the tax against you. And according to the Constitution, the executive branch and the judicial branch have no constituted authority to be able to tax the people. Because, again, the Constitution says that in all matters over $20 must have a trial by jury. because the jury trials, that's the legislative branch. The people decide to tax, not any of the other branch of government. So if you've been given a ticket by an executive officer, well, that is a tax from a branch of government that has no authority to tax you. It must come from a jury trial because it's over $20, just like the
So
Constitution says.
infraction, misdemeanor, felony, all the same thing.
So this is the information issue. Because if a prosecutor is charging you by information, that is the executive branch that's creating the debt against you, the debt that's owed to society. And the executive branch cannot create a debt against the people because we didn't provide that. That's why a grand jury must be there to create the debt owed to society, because the legislative branch is the only branch that can create the debt. So if you did not get charged by, or the debt was not created by a jury, grand jury, then that is not a valid debt. It's a fraudulent debt created by a branch of government that has no authority to create a debt against the people, because it would be in violation of the Constitution. So you need to understand that, like, child support, it's not valid because it's not being created by, it's not a debt or tax created by a branch of government that can create it. It's created by the executive branch. When a prosecutor brings an information, right, and charges you by way of information, that is a charge or a debt against society that's created by a branch of government that doesn't have authority to create that debt against you, because the Constitution says that it must be created by the legislative branch, which is the jury. The people create the debt, and the jury represents the legislative branch in the courtroom. Okay? Same thing with speeding tickets or anything else. If it's over $20, that debt must originate from the proper branch of government. Otherwise, it's a overstepping of separation of powers, right? And so that's a fact. Now, so again, the stamp tax was extremely unpopular amongst colonists. It led to the Revolutionary War. And there's actually 3 places in the Declaration of Independence that Thomas Jefferson talked about the stamp tax issue. One is, he said in the Declaration, he said that we are subjected to a jurisdiction foreign to our laws. In other words, we were subjected to admiralty jurisdiction, a jurisdiction foreign to our laws. He was making reference to the fact that the king, with the stamp tax, had switched us from common law jurisdiction into admiralty jurisdiction. And the reason why is because admiralty jurisdiction is a court martial. You're brought into an administrative proceeding, right? And you're being tried in an administrative proceeding, as opposed to a proceeding that's based upon common law jurisdiction. The Constitution is common law. Admiralty is contract law. Now, I can tell you the point in which we transferred into admiralty jurisdiction. It was when America went into bankruptcy, because bankruptcy is governed by admiralty jurisdiction. So when America was placed into, the corporation was placed into bankruptcy, which we've never came out of, that's when they switched us into admiralty jurisdiction. Now, so the king switched us into admiralty jurisdiction because in 1628 all the way up until 1776, when we declared our independence, the king couldn't get a jury to find anybody guilty of violating the stamp tax because the colonists didn't agree with it. It was unpopular. So no jury would find anybody guilty of violating the stamp tax. Thus the king said, well, if you're not going to find anybody guilty, then I'm going to remove your jury trial by switching you into a different jurisdiction, a jurisdiction foreign to our laws, and now we're going to prosecute you by information, by arbitrary or capricious acts. They called it back then a trial by affidavit, which is information. So the king's agents would create an affidavit, and they would take you to trial on that affidavit, but your right to confront your accuser, it evaporated because that affidavit you can't put on the stand and cross-examine it.
Can you have 2 affidavits fight each other?
You could, but only if you're given the opportunity to rebut it. So if you're being arrested based upon a single set of information, and now you're being deprived of your liberty, you're already presumed guilty,
Right.
You don't have the opportunity to rebut it. That's where the irrebuttable presumption of guilt comes into play. So if you're charged by information your right to confront your accuser evaporates because you can't put the information on the stand and cross-examine it because information or affidavit at common law is truth. So that's why you have to have the grand jury, because you have to be able to challenge the hearsay accusations against you, presumed to be innocent from the beginning, and if you're not, now you're guilty until you are proven yourself innocent, and that's where the shift in the burden of proof occurs. That's where the system's gone wrong. But this goes back again to the king. So stamp tax happened. No jury would find anybody guilty of violating it. It got the king mad. He switched this to admiralty jurisdiction so that he would eliminate the jury. Now there's no trial by jury that was occurring. And that's where Thomas Jefferson said in the Declaration of Independence that in most cases we've been deprived the trial by jury. He makes that same statement. So he said in the Declaration of Independence that we've been subjected to a jurisdiction foreign to our laws, which is admiralty jurisdiction, right? And then he made the statement that in most cases we've been denied the trial by jury because in admiralty jurisdiction you don't get a trial by jury. It is a court-martial. It's an administrative proceeding that eliminates the ability for the people to find someone guilty, right? So jury trial was removed, and thus our founders, when they created the Constitution, said, well, we've been denied the right to trial by jury, even though the trial by jury was guaranteed under the Magna Carta, right? Even though we're guaranteed under common law, we've been denied in most cases the trial by jury. And think about it. Today, 98% of all convictions come by way of plea bargain. That is 98% of all criminal defendants that are not getting a trial by jury because the state is deciding to proceed under information and affidavit. And now we have a situation that our founders were in back in 1776 that caused us to declare independence because of the unjust nature and the arbitrary and capricious nature of the king's agents prosecuting us for whatever it was that they wanted to prosecute us for without having a fair and neutral decision maker to be able to be in the process. Thus, our founders preserved those through the Bill of Rights and the Constitution and all these other limitations of power. So we need to understand that this is history simply repeating itself all over again right now. That's what's happening to all of you. Is the exact same thing that our founders experienced. So what happened was that the king switched us from one jurisdiction to another, suspended the Constitution, and now allowed for his agents to be able to prosecute us. Thus, we went into the Revolutionary War, and we won the Revolutionary War. We created the Constitution. Now the thing is that the fringe that's placed around the flag, we all know the fringe.
Yep.
Right? The yellow fringe that's placed around the flag.
Courthouse, I can tell.
Right. So a fringed flag is a battle flag. You all know that, right? There's enough evidence that shows that. So when you place a fringe around a flag, it is a battle flag, right? You are in a battle condition. You are at war, right? Now, what's interesting is that most of the state constitutions, such as Massachusetts and Virginia plan, most of the state constitutions, Pennsylvania, it says the right to trial by jury shall not be infringed. Look at your state constitution. It will say the right to trial by jury shall not be infringed. And the origin of that word infringed came from our own founders' experience that the moment that you infringe a flag, your right to trial by jury goes away because that is an admiralty jurisdiction flag. So if you place a fringe around the flag, you don't have a jury trial because we've been placed into a jurisdiction foreign to our laws. Therefore, the right to trial by jury shall not be infringed.
So if I bring a regular flag in, they gotta give me a trial by jury.
So in order to fix this, we have to get out of bankruptcy, right? But we have to get out of bankruptcy, which is part of what I'm trying to advocate here. Is that if we forgive the debt, right, owed to society, if we forgive the debt, we can come out of bankruptcy. And I've already proposed the way to do it to some people, so what put us into bankruptcy? I don't know if you guys have been through bankruptcy, then you might know and understand what I'm saying. But in bankruptcy, what happens is the very first thing that has to happen is that the court creates a fiduciary agent, right? And that fiduciary agent is responsible for your your trust while you're in the bankruptcy. And so you don't have access to your accounts and your money, and you can't go buy a house or go buy a car without permission from your fiduciary, right? So there's a fiduciary agent that is responsible for your estate while you're in bankruptcy. Once you come out of bankruptcy, then you're removed from that guardianship, that fiduciary, and now you're able to, be free once again. So if America is nothing more than a corporation, right, which it is, then in 1925, when we went into bankruptcy, such we did, we went into bankruptcy, there is a fiduciary agent that was created, and that fiduciary agent is known as the Fed. The Fed is the fiduciary agent. So in order for America to be in bankruptcy, then the corporation and all the assets must be under trust of the fiduciary. And so that's why in order for the Fed to be created, they had to create House Joint Resolution 192, HJR 192. What HJR 192 says is it says all debt, public and private, is to be paid by the Fed, the fiduciary agent. So all debt, public and private, must be paid by the person that's in charge of the estate, right? Because I, as a member of the corporation, I'm the protected party. China can't contact me because we're in bankruptcy, right? China has to contact my fiduciary agent if they want to get paid. That's how bankruptcy works. So as long as America is in bankruptcy and remains in bankruptcy, all debt, public and private, is to be paid by the Fed, which is why we pay debt with debt notes that comes from the Fed, because the Fed pays all debt, public and private. As long as we're in bankruptcy, the Fed is responsible for all debt, public and private. But the moment that we finalize the bankruptcy, then guess what happens then? The Fed is responsible for all debt, right? So the $37 trillion that we allegedly owe, it's not our debt. The Fed took on the responsibility of being the fiduciary agent. So they are responsible for it. But do the people own the Fed? No. The 7 biggest banks in the world own the Fed. The banks put themselves into a position to be the fiduciary agent for United States of America and decided to loan to an at-risk corporation, and they are responsible for all debt. So if we finalize the debt, that $37 trillion is responsible for the 7 biggest banks in the world, not the people. China's still going to do business with us tomorrow because they're going to get their money. And I guarantee you that the Bank of England and all these other banks, I guarantee you that they made way more than $37 trillion over the last 100 years of lying to the people, saying that they're in a fiduciary agent. Now, the other thing is that when you are in bankruptcy, you don't own your own property, right? Your house can be taken from you by the Fed. Your car can be taken by the fiduciary agent. Your car can be taken by the fiduciary agent. All of your property is at risk as long as you're in bankruptcy. And that fiduciary agent can make a decision to take whatever property they want. Which is why, as long as we're in bankruptcy, you don't own your house. You don't own your car. The Fed can take your car, the Fed can take your house, and the Fed can take your children, because your children is your property. So we can resolve this if we finalize the bankruptcy, because there comes a point in time when we have to look at corporations. United States of America is a corporation. We all know this. There's enough evidence out there. We know United States of America is nothing more than a corporation. And if it's nothing more than a corporation, then there comes a point in time when we got to look at the corporation. We got to say, is that really a good business model? Is that really serving its consumers? And if it's not, then there comes a point in time when you've got to say, you know what? We're gonna take our losses and we're gonna take this corporation in a different direction. And if the United States of America was created by slave owners to preserve and protect their property, there comes a point in time when we have to say, is this really the corporation that we want to continue to push for? And I don't think it is, because it was the wrong business model. This was a business model that protected the rich and preserved their property. And that's not in the best interest of the people, because the people are not property. So we have an opportunity right now to finalize the bankruptcy. And when we finalize the bankruptcy, all of you will come up out of your guardianships that you're in. Every single person in America is in a guardianship right now under the Fed, fiduciary agent, the Fed. And if we finalize the bankruptcy, then all of you will be raised up out of your guardianship and you will have control of your assets once again. Your house will be your house. Your car will be your car. Your children will be your children. And you won't be subject to the guardianship where the Fed is able to control your assets and be able to take them through the bankruptcy process. This is what we can do. But in order to do this, God says two things must happen. One, we got to release all the slaves, right? There can't be any guardianships anymore. And number two, you're going to have to forgive the debt of your neighbor. All public debt must be forgiven. And if we do that, then the $37 trillion that we believe that is binding us to foreign corporations and the chains of these financial institutions will not exist anymore. Because we have a Fed that is owned by the 7 biggest banks in the world who has accepted the liability of taking on all of the debt of the corporation, and they've chosen for 100 years to loan to an at-risk corporation at their own detriment. People in the United States, we can wake up and we can decide tomorrow, let's go ahead and start something different. Instead of the United States of America, maybe we need the United People of America, because it's not the states that make us great, it's the people that make us great. So let's put back the power to people, and let's go ahead and shut down what our founders created 243 years ago that is not doing us the good for all of us. All right?
Agree.
I don't really care what you say, Matt. You can say I'm wrong all you want, but I'm not wrong. But good luck.
Bye.
Yeah. Hang on here. Let me.
So what's the biggest I guess discourse on that theory? Okay, nothing short.
Except Facebook.
It's a Facebook.
Oh, is that mine?
Yeah. Says broadcast pause. There you go.
I think I've got enough, probably enough power to. So the biggest discourse is going to be the people, the nationalism perspective. You know, nationalists, they want to look at America and say, oh, look how amazing and great America is.
Right.
Without
I'm getting some ice cream.
Yeah, without acknowledging. Sure. Yeah, I'll take some more. So it's the nationalist perspective.
Gotcha.
Right. Anybody that doesn't look at
Chocolate or the you have this orange vanilla stuff.
Matt, I'm not interested in talking with you, brother. You can either listen to what I got to say or not. If you don't, that's perfectly fine. But I'm trying to give you the knowledge that you need, and if you don't want it, then you're welcome to go and listen to someone else all you want. But I'm not interested in arguing with it. I know this. So it's the nationalist perspective that's going to be a challenge on this, because the people that stand back and say, "Oh, America is amazing and America's great and we're the best country in the world with the most just system that there is," those are the people that don't understand that America's got all kinds of problems, and they're unwilling to reflect on not only what is good about America but how America can be better. It's the nationalist perspective that's going to stand in the way. People of the United States needs to understand that America is not that great right now, right? We have all kinds of problems, and if we are not willing to acknowledge those problems, then any domestic or any foreign policy that's in conflict with domestic policy is rendered ineffective, and we're rightfully labeled hypocrites. The American people are hypocrites because before we can go to another country, Afghanistan, and say, set your people free, we have to first look at ourselves and say, is what we're preaching overseas consistent with what we're practicing here at home? And it's not. Because before we can say, set your people free, we need to recognize the fact that here in America, we enslave and imprison at a rate of 16 times more than the next closest industrialized nation. We need to understand that here in America, we've had an 800% increase in the prison population in 30 years. We need to recognize the fact that here in America, we have 5% of the world's human population, but 26% of the world's prison population. The whole world knows the hypocrites that we are when we go overseas and say, oh, set your people free. And yet we are enslaving at a rate of 16 times more than the next closest industrialized nation. So we've got to address the domestic policy first before we go out and preach something overseas.
Who's right now on the face of earth? Who's best at it? What system seems to be working? You know, I play devil's advocate a little bit here because.
So Sweden right now today.
You slide in.
Sweden right now today is shutting down its final prison. The nation of Sweden does not have prisons anymore because they chose a restorative-based justice system. They chose to heal the people from the trauma because hurting people hurt people. That is the basis of crime.
Okay.
So rather than taking a hurting person and put him into a more hurtful situation, we're going to take people and we're going to heal them from the trauma that they've been inflicted, and this is well known.
Mm-hmm.
So the nation of Israel is another great example. So in Sweden, they're shutting down their last prison. In Sweden, if you're a serial killer, right, then you're not sent to an institution that's going to put you into solitary confinement and is going to call you an animal, right? Or is going to murder you, right? Instead, they take that person and they heal him, right? So the reason why one human being hurts another human being is because they don't have respect for life. But that respect for life derives from their own respect for self. So if you can get a child who's grown up to an adult who's hurting people because of the hurt that he went through as a child, if you can heal the trauma and make him respect himself, then he will respect others. This is well known. And a great example is the nation of Israel. The nation of Israel has a community known as the kibbutza. And the kibbutza is such a peaceful community that if you are sentenced to, or if you committed a violent crime within the nation of Israel, they will sentence you to go and live within the kibbutza, right? You will go and live in the kibbutza. That is your sentence, right? And so as the sentence is, because the kibbutz is such a peaceful community with no record of homicide in its history, that people will go there and they learn how to live peacefully because the environment that you're in dictates what you learn. So again, if I and my wife, if we create an abusive environment, we will produce abusive children. Mm-hmm. The children will be a product of the environment that we create. I can't blame my son for being violent if I myself am violent because I taught him to do that, right? And it's the same thing with people. If we are living in a society where our leaders are embezzling from the Social Security Act so that they can pay states to destroy families, right? Or funnel money to Ukraine, right? If we're doing that, they are creating the criminal environment, and then we, the people, are learning how to do that because that's the way it's being led.
Right. We rob Peter to pay Paul, for example.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
So the answer is that if we can take people and put them into an environment where we can teach them how to live, right, and how to be peaceful, then we will produce peaceful people.
Like John Lennon said.
Yeah.
And really, I mean,
but it's all about restorative. It's changing our perspective. So the way I like to say it is this: is we have got to stop looking at what people do, because when we look at what they do, all that we see is the monster that needs to pay for the things they've done. And that creates this vengeance-based system that we have in place today, where we want that monster to pay for what that monster did.
Of course, yeah.
But what we got to do is we got to look at what was done to that person long before that crime, as a child, as a husband, as a mother. And then we see that something tragic happened to them that changed the trajectory of their life, and it wasn't their fault. And now we want to heal them, now we want to help them, and now we can see the reasons why they've done the things they've done.
Are you familiar with the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous?
No, but I've been
That
told.
is exactly what it says. We think of people, so.
I've been told I need
in
to.
the third, yeah, in the third step, that's how we turn it around. We go, all right, this person didn't hurt us. They did something. They're sick. We think of them as spiritually sick.
Yeah.
And we pray for forgiveness for ourselves inside, so that we have the power to do that. And that only comes from God. But it's a different perspective that you can have on somebody, because instantly, somebody who you have fierce resentment for, and resentment, like I said, comes from what? Two things.
Yeah.
It comes from tyranny. So if you're getting tyranny, you got to stand up to that tyranny, or else that resentment will not go away. Or it also comes from you need to grow the hell up. That's something. That's something really cool. That extra perspective of just, and it's just slight. It's just really slight.
Yeah. So we have good examples of other nations that have gone restorative-based justice systems. Sweden, Denmark, Israel, they have some of the lowest recidivism rates in the world.
I lived in Denmark.
Right?
I lived in Copenhagen.
But what they did was, instead of calling someone a monster, they took the person who grew up and became a monster, and they taught him how once again to be a human.
I'm sorry. So when I was over there, there was an American that was in their jail for, it was like a mass murderer in Denmark, and they did a special on him. And
Yeah.
we're doing that I just remember it was like the beginnings of, so this was like 2000, early 2000s.
Yeah.
And he was from here, and he went over there and he, did something heinous, and then, but yeah, I mean, it's definitely different.
We here in America, so in the 60s, was really the start of the ramp up for mass incarceration. We all know what the CIA was doing in Vietnam. No denying that. They were bringing back whatever they were bringing back, and they were dumping on the streets of New York and LA so that they could addict certain demographics within our society. Right? It's well known. Once again, I know that TikTok's probably going to kick me off for talking about this, but because they hate it when I talk about this, but we know that that's the truth. That's what the Vietnam War was about. It was about heroin. That's what it was about. And so then they brought it back, and then they criminalized, these addictions at a mass scale. And then once they did that, that's what led to mass incarceration, because during that period of time, the 1960s, if you were caught with a single hit of cocaine, then you could be sent to prison for the rest of your life from one single hit. Jeez. Right? The rest of your life. And they did that intentionally because the judges back then, they would like to say, well, who's going to stick up for a drug addict? That's what they did. Who's going to stick up for him? Right. But what happened then was that in the early or the late 90s, our government recognized the fact that the government was becoming much more accommodating to drugs. And they knew that they were going to have to decriminalize them. But they needed to find another driver. And they found that in the early 2000s, I believe in 2002, with a case that came to the Supreme Court that said, is porn legal? Right? Is porn legal? And the Supreme Court said, oh, here's our chance. Yes, porn is completely legal. It's just an expression of speech. And what the court did was they started flooding all of the houses across America with images of sexual deviant behavior, right? Because the court knew that if you create an environment of sexual deviance, you would eventually start to produce sexual deviance, right? And that would be mass incarceration, and then they could decriminalize drug use because there would be another type of addiction that would already be in place. And now today, the judges are saying, well, who's going to stick up for a sex offender? I'm not saying that this behavior is acceptable. I'm saying that this was the intentions of the Supreme Court. This is why they made that. They didn't make that decision because it was the best moral decision for our country. Right. They made that decision because it created a new addictive environment so that they would be able to comply with the people's will of decriminalizing drug use. Right? That was their intention. But so we can see what's happened, the lead up of mass incarceration and so on in the 1960s. And I don't remember where I was going, what the question was on that. But
It was, what's better, I guess. Like, what were we, so where were we going with that? Where we're going, it's been a few hours. So, what goes in its place? Like, what's a better type system? I think that's really where it's going. It's from what I think I hear is that everything's coming from the tyrant that wants us to be imprisoned, kind of like what the Bible says and the people that were in the running around in that little like area for what was it called outside of this, and then finally let them in the city kind of thing. And that's what it seems like it's talking about.
well, let's look at it like this. So in the prison system right now today, we have 2.9 million prisoners, right? We have 10 million people pre and post conviction, right? So you got roughly 13 million people that's involved in the system. You have 70 million people that have been charged with or convicted of a crime here in America, right? That's 1/3 of our population that has been involved in the justice system. All right. So the thing is that 2.9 million prisoners currently in prison. 78% of those people are there on something related to drug offenses.
Right.
That is not a dangerous person. That's a hurting person, right? Because the reason why people turn to drugs is because they're unhappy. They're seeking an artificial mechanism to feel happy because God created man to be in a joy state, right? So when we're unhappy, we don't want to remain in that state, so we seek an artificial mechanism to make ourselves happy. That's what addiction and drugs is all about.
Absolutely.
So the thing is, 78% of all people in prison here in America is there because of drug-related offenses. That is not a dangerous person. That's a hurting person. And you deal with a hurting person much differently than you deal with a dangerous person. The point of prisons was to protect society from dangerous people. That was the point, right?
So this is something without capital punishment.
Yeah, I mean, how can we? Anyway, yeah, I don't want to.
That would be tough.
I don't want to go into capital punishment because I used to be supportive of it, but not anymore. It's because the thing is and these are numbers that you guys got to look at. You guys got to know the death penalty was reinstated here in America in 1976. So there's been a little over 1,500 people that have been executed here in America since 1976. A little over 1,500 people. Of those 1,500 people, 139 of them have been proven to have been innocent after they were murdered.
That's a problem.
139. Of the remaining, another 186 were exonerated after being placed on death row, meaning they are factually innocent. Those two numbers, when you combine 139 with 186, that is almost 18% of the people that we've had on death row that were factually innocent, and those are just the ones that we have evidence to be able to prove,
right.
DNA or whatever else.
And you see how, I mean, I saw how
139 we know were innocent after we murdered them, and yet...
And we're not doing a good job in this, no, so I get it. That makes sense.
Those are terrible numbers. 18% of people...
One is too many.
One is too many. Yeah.
Because because you can avoid that. We probably make a lot of. That's counterproductive because I think that's not really a.
So of the 78% that are sitting in prison right now today, I have to say that those are people that hurt nobody but themselves.
Yeah.
Right? Because the only person that is hurt by drugs is the person that's on the drugs. Right? By society. Society's not damaged. There is no victim other than the state, and yet it's the state that's promoting such behavior by the destruction, breakdown of the family, the removal of children, all of these other things that the system is doing that's making people unhappy is by the system that's promoting that unhappiness.
Well, I mean,
and then increasing it. So if the system is responsible for creating the unhappiness, the system has to be responsible for the drug use, and if the system is responsible for the drug use, then the system is the only victim that exists in the case of drug use.
I mean, so a radical thought is that I'm responsible, that I, me as the individual, that I'm responsible for my behavior, and it where I can come and I can see people in a different perspective, that's where that I can change. So if I can see somebody as a just a sick person, and that they need help, and need to be seen in a different perspective rather than it being societal, like it still stands with me to change, right? Or am I thinking differently?
I don't know. Hang on here.
There's some lovers on there.
Nah, we're just gonna get this guy out of here.
Who's it, Matt?
I don't know who it is. Yeah, Matt something. Yeah. I just don't have time to deal
Right.
with someone arguing. So, there we go. There we go. Okay. I don't know. I mean, when you
Well, I mean,
think
that's what I think.
when you think about the trauma-based issues, and you know,
Sure.
there's some amazing. I mean, not just Denmark and Sweden, you know, and they chose to not criminalize drug use, right? They chose a restorative-based justice system as opposed to a punitive-based justice. We here in America, we're the only ones in the 1960s when the whole world was trying to deal with the drug issue, drug use and addiction and all the rest, we were the only nation that chose a punitive-based system. We're going to punish people for drug use. We're the only one. Like everybody else went restorative, right? And started, you know, programs. But nonetheless, like there's some incredible doctors out there, psychologists and stuff like Dr. Matea, right? He was from Vancouver, BC. I mean, he's got a lot of videos out there. He's incredible. And some of his ideas and stuff, he's by far the best when it comes to addictions and understanding addictions and so on. So, you know,
there's a lot of new evidence for it. I do know that, and well, something that blows me away more than anything else is like my whole life I've been taught that. Is it really? Oh, geez. That like the cannabis stuff is helping people. Like this non-medicine stuff is freaking helping, which makes me switch a perspective. And I think that's all that's important. It is.
Well, I think that with those, the problem is the petroleum-based or pharmaceuticals and the lobbying behind them that would be contrary to the homeopathic type medicine that we should be using.
Right.
I mean, but that's a whole area that I don't think we want to go into. But at the end of the day, you know, I do think that the problem with homeopathic medicine and homeopathic treatment is deriving from the lobbyists on the pharmaceutical side and the petroleum-based pharmaceuticals, and I'm certainly not an advocate for that. We need to go back to, because God created stuff on earth to be able to treat anything that we would find here on earth, right? We don't need synthetic pharmaceutical petroleum-based pharmaceuticals to treat the things that God created.
Sure.
We're gonna have man-made ills, but nonetheless. So I want to wrap it up here because we're getting late and we have church in the morning. But I do want to say that 78% of people in prison are there on something related to drugs. That's not a dangerous person. That's a hurting person. Those people we need to get into treatment to get them healed so that they can be happy, right? We deal with hurting people much differently than we deal with dangerous people. Of the remaining, right? So 78 to 100, that's 22%. Of the remaining, most criminologists across the world agree that only about 4% of our prison population is a danger to society. Most criminologists across the world agree only 4% is a danger to society. Now the numbers would indicate the accuracy of that, because our justice system all the way up until 1960 was flatline. You know, a couple 100,000 people was all the prisoners that we had, and that is consistent, right? And we were flatlined the whole time. So the purpose of the prison was to remove people that would be a danger to society, to protect society from people that were dangerous, right? Mm-hmm. So if 4% of our prison population is a danger to society, the difference between 78 to 4% is property-related offenses. Now that's not dangerous behavior, that's aberrant behavior, right? And aberrant behavior we deal with much differently than dangerous behavior as well. Hurting people, we put them into treatment, and we get them the treatment that they need so that they can get healed from the trauma that's making them unhappy. Aberrant behavior, we teach them how to have a life so they don't have to steal the things that they need to survive, right? That's how you deal with aberrant behavior. But that starts with leaders. Leaders need to lead people. Fathers need to lead their children so that they're not aberrant children. And so at the end of the day, we can resolve 96% of our prison population by either one, treating them for trauma to help them be happy, or two, let's educate them, train them, and let's help them have a life so that they don't need to steal anything, because that's not the way that we do it. That leaves 4% in our prison that society needs to be protected from, and now we have a manageable, sustainable system once again. But those people, even that 4%, we're not going to force any involuntary servitude, so that the states can benefit off of such service. So that's where we're at.
Sounds good. Thank you for coming, man. I do this. I didn't know it was 11 o'clock at night.
It's 11:30.
Another thing that helps with that, switch like the goods that get stolen from you. You just have insurance for it. It's no big deal. That's what they do in Scandinavia. Oh, we got insurance for it. They can sneak into our house, steal our stuff. It's fine.
Yeah. Well, I mean, but all of these are issues.
Change of perspective.
These are issues that the American people need to
Talk about.
Mm-hmm. But as long as the system is ignoring it and abstaining on it, then we're not even talking. We're not going to solve anything, because as long as the court refused to acknowledge that there's a problem, then we don't have a problem. The first step to dealing with the problem is we admit that there is a problem. So that's what I'm trying to do. I want to get out here and I want to tell the American people over and over and over again, controlling the narrative that we have a problem.
And our life, life is unmanageable, which is a whole other thing.
Yeah.
We can get into that next time.
Guys, thank you so much for everything. If you guys want to support, please please support. So we're on the last little tail end of the funding right now. We've only got maybe $150 that we have. We have a big week next week. Guys, we're not stopping, you know that. If you guys want to donate, don't donate to a scammer, right? Make sure that you donate to us. It's We Shall Be Free. Your Cash App, Chime, Venmo, PayPal, they're all exactly the same. It's We Shall Be Free. You guys are not hiring me to come and help you with your case. You are paying me to build a criminal or develop criminal investigation so we can hold criminals accountable for the crimes they've committed against you and your family. I deal with substantive law enforcement, law enforcement. I'm building a case against criminals that are committing crimes against you and your family. That's what you guys are paying me to do, okay? You're not paying me to come in and do anything else. But if you guys want to donate, we need the donations, guys. We need them really, really bad. So we have Cash App, Chime, Venmo, PayPal. They are all exactly the same as We Shall Be Free. That's WESHALLBEFREE. Guys, download the script and the notice and the affidavits from the website, justicewithoutlimits.org. Get into your local city council, your local county commissioners, provide the script, read it, help us out so we can bring as much noise and attention to this. Please, there's no other accounts for myself or Jessica. If you're being contacted by someone that is outside of this account or her account, her primary account, then it is not from us. It's a scammer. Please don't get scammed, and don't blame us if you do get scammed. We're sorry that these people exist, but there's nothing we can do to stop it, okay? And what else? That's it. Thank you guys so much. Thank you, John. Thank you, Amy. And guys, together we shall be free, all right? God bless everybody. Thank you.
I haven't thought that way in a long time since I lived in Europe. Since I used to have that actual mind frame out, and then you come back here and you just get washed out of you because nobody wants to hear that.
How do you turn this off here?
Maybe it's out there.
Bye, TikTok.
Oh, right there.
Love you
Okay.
guys.
Thank you, guys.
Nobody wants to talk about that. It was so cool in the.
Thank you, Facebook. Thank you guys so much, guys. God bless, guys. Okay, thank you for joining us tonight. Thank you, YouTube. Appreciate it, guys. Thank you so much.